If everybody could find their seats, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Boy, you got quiet quickly. Hi, my name is Bruce Nasby. I'm the president of Global Advisory Associates. It's a pleasure to welcome you here today to the Midwest Leadership Forum. We've got a series of 4 national speakers coming in here over the next 12 months, and I know you're going to enjoy the one we have here today as well as the one in the months ahead. You know, these are trying times for all business people and community leaders. Our businesses need more workers. Our supply chains are disrupted. There's polarization in politics entering into the workforce. And our employees are coming to work worrying about their parents and worrying about their kids. Now more than ever, it calls for leaders that can work with our employees and our vendors and our customers. You know, I've always focused on 3 leadership principles out of all the ones you hear at various conferences. 1 is to be a lifelong learner. 2, to be an engaged listener. And 3, to care for everybody, your family, your workers, your vendors, your customers. Our speaker today and all of our speakers in the months ahead will cover these topics in precise detail and with amazing presentation skills. I've heard our speaker today and you'll be blown away by Cujo. I created this forum to make a difference. Let me know later today if we were successful. I'm also been sharing some powerful motivational quotes on the screen here before we started today. I love quotes, and if you got one you'd like me to share at a future event, please let me know and we'll incorporate it next time. We'll also be showing those quotes during the break. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors. We've got Central Bank and Central Trust. We have City Utilities and SRC. Thank you for being our co-sponsors. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. I love that sound. We got a good, powerful room and we're filling it up today. But finally, let me talk about our presenting sponsor. Connell Insurance they've been providing seminars for years to their customers and vendors and friends and potential customers. Recently, Connell Insurance's new president, Jeff Seifert, and I got together and we talked about taking this event to the next level by bringing in top national speakers. Let me introduce Jeff Seifert, president of Connell Insurance, to talk to you a little bit more about that and to introduce our speaker today.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, welcome to Branson, Missouri. We're happy you're here. Wow, okay, so who has been to the Connell Seminar Series in the past? Anybody? Oh, awesome. Well, it's good to have you back. We've changed things up just a bit. We brought in Bruce, we brought in Global Advisory Associates. We've kind of expanded our horizon to bring you the next level of speaker series. And so we're excited to have Cujo here with us today. But before we do this, I'm sorry, I know we did this last time, so if you're here with me, and I hope this doesn't squeal, but we do this thing every time. You remember we started like a year ago about what's good news? Remember good news? You remember good news. We did it last time. So who has some good news they'd like to share? Don't make me pick on you. I'm gonna walk to the back. Oh, we have good news over here. I really like this. This is inspiring to me. All right, I'm on the way. Here, I'm gonna cut right through here. What is your name? Teresa. Teresa, where are you from? Okay, good news, Teresa.
I'm going on vacation tomorrow.
Oh, wow. In the current environment, that's amazing news. Congratulations. Good news, anybody? She didn't even have to pay for that. Good news, anybody? This is not Rotary, it's okay. Good news. All right, listen, we have a row of professionals here. There's gotta be some good news. No, you can't look away. Here, okay, here, I'll hand the mic over here. Good news? Good news.
I hear there's some rain in the forecast.
Okay, that is good news. From your fire professional, a round of applause. Glad somebody's looking at that. You know, honestly, we did script this last time. Ron Bogart always has good news on behalf of Gold Mechanical.
I do. I have 100% of the people I invited to come actually attended.
Hey, all right, good news, good news, good news. Oh, okay, I'm going to pick on one more person, and then one more person can raise their hand. I won't pick on you, I promise, unless you want to be picked on. Okay. Any good news from Olson and Associates?
Maybe not from Olson, but in general, but me personally, the kids have gone back to school. So that for me
Round of
is
applause
great.
for that. Yes. See, life is feeling so much more normal. People are going on vacations again. That happened. All right. Any other good news? Good news? Who are you?
Megan Short, Springfield Contractors. I was selected as one of the Springfield Business Journal Most Influential Women.
Oh, yeah. That's the kind of conference you're at. That is the kind of conference you're at. Okay, one more person. I'm sorry. It's my favorite. How is Stratford?
Stratford, Missouri is doing great. We've got a lot of growth going on in Stratford, a lot of businesses coming to our industrial park, and we're increasing our housing inventory. So if you're looking for a house in Stratford, they're coming.
All right, that's the good news segment. Take that, Rotary. You can take that. That was free. All right, now we're going to introduce one of my personal favorite speakers. First of all, real quick, just on behalf of Connell Insurance, we're so excited that you're joining us here today. I'm very passionate about process. I see Tim Connell out there shaking his head. Process, process, process. That's what makes us better. And this strategy and deploying this in your business or organization or community really can make a difference. And so debrief to win, that's what you're going to hear this morning. So Mr. Robert Cujo Teschner is a retired F-15, F-22 fighter pilot. He's also a former F-15 weapons school instructor with the U.S. Air Force Top Gun School, F-22 fighter squadron commander, senior joint chief staff officer, and combat veteran. From 2004 through mid-2006, he served as the U.S. Air Force's expert in post-mission debriefing, the methodology used by high-performing military teams to self-correct and improve continuously. Mr. Teschner is a multiple award-winning fighter aviator and leader, an award-winning writer and author of the national best-selling book, Debrief to Win. Please help me welcome to the stage Mr. Robert Cujo Teschner.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here in your midst in beautiful Branson. My family loves coming here. The only thing that disappoints me is the fact that they're not here today only because school started. We've got 5 little kids and they're all blessedly back in school. So I'm with you. That's a great, great bit of good news for us as a society. But we're talking today in the midst of global disruption. And I think it would be wrong for us to ignore the fact that our country right now is suffering a bit. And what I would ask you all to do at this point is to stand up. And I would ask that everybody here join me in 13 seconds of silence and silent reflection as we think on the lives that have been lost and forever affected at Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. Please bow your heads. Thank you. Please be seated. Most of you, that is. I would now ask that every veteran who has served in the armed forces of these great United States, please rise to be recognized. I would further ask that the family members of veterans please rise to be recognized at this point. Your community is such a special one. Your connection to those who are downrange protecting us is so strong, and your passion for our great country is equally so, which is part of the reason why it always charges me up personally to be in your midst. And now let's think about the opportunities of the future. Again, it's a disruptive time right now. It's very easy for us to sink into the notion, potentially, that so much is lost. And so I'd like to share with you a quick reflection from somebody who I've been privileged to get to know in the course of my life, Major General John Borling. When you look up Major General John Borling, what you're going to find is a warrior, a leader, a servant, who served by spending over 6 years of his life in the Hanoi Hilton, as it is affectionately known by those who were there. He was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. And I had the privilege of meeting him 40 years after he wrote a bunch of poetry in his head. In Hanoi, he wasn't allowed to write anything down, but he started to capture his experience, and he mentally remembered poems. And 40 years after he had written these in his mind, he wrote them on paper. It took that long for him to be able to put it down on paper. And he went on a national tour to support his book. My wife and I came and joined him on the tour at one of his locations. And during the question and answer session, somebody in the audience who clearly had an issue with millennials raised the question, General Borling, what do you think? I mean, with the greatest generation dying off, and issues with the current generation, what's the prognosis for our country? And General Borling's words stirred me that evening. He said, greatest generation dying off, what are you talking about? He said, I firmly believe that the greatest generation of Americans has yet to be born. If that's not the case, there is no hope, and I'm a man of hope. We'll bounce back from this. We're going to come back strong. And it's because of your support to our great nation that we'll do so. Thank you again for all that you do to support these great United States of America. And with that as the background, I want to introduce you to a little concept, a workshop that we call in my company, Debrief to Win. And Jeff so elegantly introduced me. I feel so welcome here in your midst. He mentioned who I am and what my background is, and he specifically talked about the fact that I'm known as Robert Cujo Teschner. And I've been at this gig long enough to know that the call sign Cujo usually sparks conversation. There's going to be somebody out there that questions, why did we hire somebody who's named after a rabid dog to come in and lead a workshop here in Branson on a Friday morning? So because that question is always raised, why don't we just discuss it right off the top? Why Cujo? Why did you pick Cujo? Let's talk for just a moment about the evolution of an American Air Force fighter pilot. There's at least one fellow fighter pilot in the office, in the environment here today, so he can call BS anytime, all right? Go right ahead, my friend. Here's how it works in an American Air Force fighter pilot's evolution. You get your commission, however it might be. You've got to be a commissioned officer to go out and fly airplanes. In my case, I went to the United States Air Force Academy. I think I was the last member of my class accepted. I say that because I found out just a couple of weeks prior to basic cadet training that I was going to Colorado Springs, which means a bunch of people had to decline their appointments. I was the reject that got in. 4 years later, I graduated. That's kind of cool. So I've got my rejection letter right next to my diploma. It's a nice little 1-2 punch. I was blessed. I joined the Air Force at a time where strategically our government said we don't need pilots any longer. I came in at the time that the Soviet Union was falling apart. There was a peace dividend, and so only a quarter of my class got to go fly. I was one of the lucky ones, the reject who got to go fly. I went off to Texas, to Shepherd Air Force Base in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas. I spent 13 months in pilot training, learning how to do cool things like take off smoothly, land even more smoothly. As a side note, the next time that you go out there and you crash land with Southwest, Delta, American, United, that's a Navy or Marine Corps pilot, all right? Not an Air Force pilot. You got to learn how to fly from point A to point B, how to deal with things like weather and emergencies, how to fly 3 feet away from another airplane in close formation, scariest stuff I've done to date. And at the conclusion of those 13 months, you earn your pilot wings. They go right over here on your chest. You feel like you're somebody, but you're not technically qualified to fly anything yet, okay? 13-month-long program. At the end of that program, the class kind of disperses. The helicopter pilots go to helicopter school, tanker transport pilots go to tanker transport schools. Fighter pilots go to a 3-month-long program called the Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals. What's that all about? It's where you start to unlearn things you learned in pilot training, and you learn how to abuse an airplane, how to treat it as an instrument of war now. That means jockeying the throttles from idle to full afterburner. That means pushing the airplane to its design limits and sometimes just a little bit beyond. It's such a fun program. Not everybody makes it through that program. If you do, then you get to go and learn how to fly your major weapon system. In my case, I was blessed. I got to pick my airplane. And I picked the Missouri-built F-15C model, the Eagle, the air-to-air variant of the world's greatest airplane ever built. And I went to Tyndall Air Force Base in beautiful Panama City, Florida, to learn how to fly that magnificent machine. And 6 months after I started, I graduated, and now I was considered qualified to fly. I had arrived, I was somebody. I was living my lifelong dream of truly becoming a fighter pilot. But just think about this. I spent about 2 years in student status after the 4-year undergraduate program that got me my commission. And so I was about done being a student. And I'm thinking to myself, hey self, now that you're somebody, your new teammates have got to be happy to have you on board, right? You're so fully trained, you're energized, you're young, you're bringing all this enthusiasm and goodness. And so I go down the street from Panama City to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, to Eglin Air Force Base, to the 58th Fighter Squadron of the 33rd Fighter Wing, and I knock on the front door, and here's how those first couple of days went in the 58th Fighter Squadron for me. Door opens, somebody opens the door and says, oh, hey everybody, we've got a new guy. And I was affectionately named FNG3. What does that mean? We're in mixed company, we're in distinguished company today. Frickin' new guy 3. There were 2 frickin' new guys ahead of me, hence FNG3. And I was told in those first couple of days that I had one mission in life. And that mission was to shut up and learn, which meant that I was comfortably right back into student status again, which meant that I came to work every day and made a bunch of mistakes, had to learn to be resilient, had to learn to pick myself up on the heels of these mistakes and try again the next day and try again the next day. And that became the rhythm of life for young FNG Teschner. It was about 6 months of being an FNG before somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, make sure that you're at roll call Friday night. We'll talk about what roll call is here in part 2 of today's workshop. Suffice to understand that it's a tribal ritual in a fighter squadron. The inside voice said, I'm there every Friday night. The outside voice said, yes, sir. Friday night I showed up to roll call and I found out that Friday it was all about me. Specifically what I found out is that the last 6 months weren't just about me shutting up and learning, but they were also an opportunity for my new teammates, my tribe, to assess, is this guy worthy of inclusion? Because inclusion has ramifications. Once you're in for life. I'll always be a fighter pilot. I may not wear the green flight suit any longer, but I'll always represent my tribe. And my tribe wants to make sure that I'm a good fit and that I do so appropriately because we care about one another. That night, they said, young FNG, you've demonstrated your willingness and ability to align your values and beliefs with that of the tribe, and so we welcome you. And the way that they welcome you in an American Air Force fighter squadron is they tell stories about you. And the threshold for truth of the stories that are told is that they have to be at least 10% true, those stories. And if you can continue to shut up and not influence, not try to push back, not say, wait a second, that never happened, how dare you? Then you might walk out of there, as I did, as Cujo, which I think is a pretty cool call sign, especially when you consider the alternative. If you try to weigh in on the stories, push back, say, wait a second, no, guess what? You're going to be Buttercup or Sunshine. And nobody wants to be known as Buttercup or Sunshine. And that, I know we did it. We named a guy Sunshine once. We actually sang You Are My Sunshine to him at the end of the naming ceremony. He was in tears. We had to have an emergency renaming the following week. So what about all this? Is it just some sort of silly, childlike tradition that we're wasting taxpayer dollars doing? No. And let me tell you why not. Tell you how important that little ritual was to young Lieutenant Teschner all the way back in 1998. When I came to work on Monday morning, my locker, the one that has my helmet and my anti-G suit and all kinds of other good stuff in it, it had Cujo on the side of it. I didn't do that, my tribe did. And within short order, beer mugs, visor covers, Friday name tags, coins, they all start showing up. All the different artifacts that we use in a fighter squadron to identify ourselves to the world. And they had Cujo emblazoned on it. I didn't do that, my teammates did. And what was most significant to me in the evolution of young me into the person that I wanted to become was that on Monday, suddenly people said, hey, Cujo, what do you think? I had a voice. And I cannot tell you how profound of an impact that made on me and how much it drove my buy-in, my engagement, my commitment to be a member of this team and to represent it well for the rest of my life. You see some of these artifacts, the challenge coin, the Friday name tag. This is interwoven into the fabric of who I am now. When I'm amongst my tribe, it's only call signs. When my wife is with me amongst my tribe, she refers to me as Cujo. And that's how I would ask you to refer to me as today. I'd be honored by that. And I'd also ask you to think about these rituals that I'm going to share with you today. And as we round out this work week and as we go into the weekend, maybe we take some time to reflect, what can we do as we look at an American Air Force fighter squadron and we understand what makes it work? What can we do differently in the future to drive performance, to drive buy-in, to drive engagement, to build the best possible teams we can? Friends, today is all about teams. Today is about taking and making those, what I would say are micro changes to enable huge impact in how it is that we go forth and we do whatever it is we do in the world in any of the various domains in which we do it. Now, let me tell you, as we get set up to get into the workshop phase, what the inspiration was to create a company to teach what I know. My company, as you know, it's called VMAX Group. Here's the origin story for it. I'll take you back in time. It's 2004. I was asked to come back and teach at the U.S. Weapons Instructor course, the Fighter Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base, Las Vegas, Nevada. Biggest honor of my life, frankly. Didn't see myself as being worthy of inclusion in that particular tribe. And I was given the responsibility of teaching 2 core courses. So the Fighter Weapons School is a 6-month-long program. We have 2 programs a year. The best of the best go there to learn how to be better. One of the courses that I was assigned to teach was the Advanced Threat course. I had to study all of our enemies to understand what their capabilities truly were and how it is we might address those capabilities to beat them. That was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity. The other core course that I was assigned to teach was how it is we practice team accountability. That sounded to me to be dry and somewhat boring, and I wasn't too jazzed by that responsibility, frankly. And the weapons school said, we're going to try and learn how to debrief as a team of teams. We're going to try and figure out how do we hold ourselves accountable as an integrated series of silos or tribes to accomplishing the mission. And they said, Cujo, you're going to fix this. You're going to build this. And so I started designing the concepts that I'm going to teach you today. At the same time, my fiance, now bride, Miss Diane, was working on the executive leadership team at a company whose name you'd recognize, and we're going to protect the innocent by not sharing it. And she shared with me daily frustrations about the way that the team didn't gel, frustrations about the absence of full accountability on the team. She went so far as to say some members of the team aren't bringing their A game. They're just showing up, they're getting a paycheck, they're going back home, and the rest of us have to carry that weight. She said, that's not fair. I said, well, I empathize. I understand where you're coming from, though I've not experienced that. But you know, what's interesting is, I bet you if we could teach what it is that I'm about to teach at the Fighter Weapons School at your company, and if they were to embrace it, it would solve your problems. We teach teamwork there. Maybe someday we're going to create a company to do so. Fast forward a decade later, I wake up from my colonoscopy in downtown Stuttgart, Germany, and Herr Dr. Meyer tells me, Mr. Teschner, I'm so sorry. We found a tumor in your lower colon. I think it's been growing for a decade. We've got to get it out right now. This is bad. Diane was pregnant with our 4th child at the time. It was one of the biggest disruptions that you could imagine. We didn't know if I had days, weeks, or months left to live. My career was in overdrive. The afterburners were in. Things were going really, really well until we had to remove my lower colon, rebuild me like Humpty Dumpty, and send me back out again. Turns out life without a lower colon is difficult. We made the decision to retire early, to go back home, to try to reduce the pressures in our life, to try and prolong my life, and to be in a place where we've got contingency options. Family is close by in case things go south again. When you don't have a lower colon and the body doesn't work the way it's designed, you can't do the things that you love to do. People ask me, Cujo, do you still fly today? The answer is no. When you have an undependable body, it's difficult to be in the cockpit of a commercial airliner. It's difficult to be pulling 9 times the force of gravity. You get the picture. I asked myself, what can I do? At the time, early on, I couldn't do very much. Took a job with a startup that allowed me to work from home. The startup never started. They folded after about 6 months. I took a job next working for a mortgage brokerage out of Chesterfield, Missouri. I was smiling and dialing, friends. I've been there. I've been on the front line of sales, trying to convince people in California and the great state of Missouri to refinance their mortgage loans. I've spoken to your neighbors here in Branson, many of which told me to pound sand. Such is life in the industry, right? I have tremendous empathy right now for salespeople. Anybody that comes to our front door in the heat of the summer months and asks us to buy, we say yes. We've changed cable companies multiple times, phone plans. I can't say no, all right? Yeah, and in the midst of all of that, I asked myself, who am I? Why am I still here? And after the mortgage company almost failed, it only exists because it was bought by another one, and the only person who's still there is the CEO, everybody else was let go. I realized that our economy thrives only because of your success. Our economy needs to strive to thrive in the midst of disruption if we want to field the defense that we need. And I recognize that one thing that I've got is 25 years of leadership experience that can be shared with you to help you navigate the disruptions that are out there always, to stay strong, to protect our country economically. That's the origin story. And every week, my family gets together. We've got 5 little kids now. We all get together to discuss how are we going to make our little impact on the big, big world and do good. That's VMAX Group. And I appreciate you inviting VMAX Group to be here in your midst today, to talk about something that usually sparks a little bit of malaise, maybe. Certainly not robust excitement. We're going to talk about accountability. We're specifically going to talk about accountability for like 3 hours this morning. Who here is fired up to talk about accountability for 3 solid hours? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the typical response. In fact, usually we don't get the woo. It's usually silence. Why does that word not spark the same level of enthusiasm as, let's say that today's workshop were titled Sell More, Win Bigger? Probably gets us more fired up. Is that a fair statement? Sell more, win bigger? What is it about accountability that causes us to not be maybe as energized? What say you? It's hard. It's hard. Why is accountability hard? It takes time. So there's a commitment component to this whole thing, and everybody here is busy. In fact, you've taken time out of your busy week to be here today. That cost you something. You're expecting to get a return on your investment of time today, right? To justify being here because work is so all-consuming. It takes time. What are some of the other things that make accountability hard? It's inherently confrontational. I like that. And so now we get into the real meat of the subject. We're talking right now about human dynamics and human teams. Anybody here have a fully robotic team yet? No. Blessedly no. And so when we're talking about human beings, when we're talking about optimizing the human system, the team system, we recognize that we've got to overcome inherent obstacles to accountability. We've got to learn to overcome issues that are fuzzy. It's not as simple as flip on the accountability switch and everything's going to be good. It gets messy, right? It's hard is the way that we've summarized this. The way that I like to talk about accountability is to start by defining terms. And today we're going to start by defining the term that we've already been throwing about. We're going to define what accountability is. Does anybody here have a good definition for this term that they'd like to share with us this morning in a public setting? Yeah, that might be asking a bit much. I'll give you a pass on this one. I'll go right to the chase. I'll tell you how it is that we define it at VMAX Group. We say accountability is learning to take absolute ownership for the outcomes that we've achieved. Absolute ownership. And we'll further define absolute as not qualifying or diminishing in any way. Man, this is tough. Here's what it looks like when we get this part wrong. Let's say that I'm the team lead. We're a big team here, and we just had a spectacular failure. And I come in, I call us all in this Friday morning to talk about it, and I say, all right, team, we failed. I'm your leader. This one is on me. Of course, Bruce screwed it up again. And Bruce always screws it up, doesn't he? And we can only pray that Bruce has learned the lesson finally that's going to prevent us from having this happen again. As I say, I'm your team leader. This one's on me. How does that come across? Fraudulently. We all see through that. We recognize I'm just mouthing words right now that I clearly don't mean. I've highlighted, I've pointed a finger at one of our teammates. I've made him feel horrible in the midst of it all, by the way. I've said this is on me, but it's not. Absolute ownership is learning to take ownership for the outcomes, which might be a bit of a countercultural approach. What kind of experiences do you have when you call somebody in to talk about performance issues and they're sitting across the table from you, and you start to outline, hey, you didn't do this quite so well, here's where I'd like you to improve. What kind of feedback do you get from the other side of the table? Defensiveness. Good. What else? Excuses. Is that what you excuses? When I ask this question in more intimate settings, here are the answers that I get. Extreme defensiveness. Excuses, justifications, counter-accusations, blame, and sometimes even, I'm out of here. I don't have to put up with this, which is difficult when we're competing for employees and talent, right? And so what we're talking about today is a bit of a challenge, because if the culture has a lot of what we've just talked about built into it, and we're advocating for taking ownership, which is countercultural, that means we've got to work at this. And that becomes hard. Here's another definition of accountability for you. This one from Britannica.com. And in this one, we talk about how accountability ties to somebody having to explain the outcome to somebody who's in a position of authority, who's also in a position, because of their virtue of authority, to issue rewards or punishments. Now, I'm very curious to know from this crowd, what do you see more of in your organizations from fellow leaders? Do you see rewards or punishments associated with accountability? How many people say it's mostly rewards? Show of hands. How many people say it's mostly punishments? Show of hands. My informal survey over the last 3 years says it's decidedly on the punishment side, which might even then tie into, when do we practice accountability most frequently? When does it usually take place in our organizations? Whatever we call it, a retrospective, a lessons learned, an after-action review, a post-mortem, a debrief. When does it take place? When something goes wrong, they say. And when something goes wrong, what does that lead to? Blame. So just think about this. You're a new employee, you've just been hired to come work in your company. And you're there just in time for an accountability session that follows a failure where somebody's going to be blamed for the bad outcome, which ends up being a form of punishment. How enthusiastic are you on day one about this new job? Probably not so much. One of the things that we do in my company is we do assessments. We do assessments amongst the members of the team to understand the lay of the land on all of the team lifecycle components. Here's an assessment we've done recently. Here's a response to the assessment. Question number 13, my teammates look forward to our accountability sessions. This is one of the highest average scores that I've seen in response to this question. We use a 10-point scale, so the ideal outcome is you've got a flat 10. Here we've got a 3.89, and that's a good number. Why is this the case? It's because of what we've talked about. And if you look at this, you have to recognize that there's a tremendous upside to getting accountability right, but we make it hard on ourselves. We prevent ourselves from getting the maximum benefit. And after spending 25 years talking about this, teaching it, living it, most importantly, in a high-performance fighter squadron, I could summarize the challenges that we all share in 3 bullets. The first one is we just don't clarify expectations, and that's a two-way street. Imagine this, you hire me to come work for you. Hey, I've got a pretty good resume. You expect me to knock it out of the park. A month in, you sit me across the table and say, Cujo, what gives? You're underperforming. I expected you to do this, 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 and this. And I come back and I'm feeling mortified. I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm like, I didn't even know that I was responsible for this, this, and this. I'll fix it. On the inside, a little part of me's died. On your side, you're just frustrated. How come he didn't get it? Maybe if we had clarified expectations up front, we wouldn't be in this position. That's an easy fix. Then you think about the fact that if accountability only follows failures, disasters, things that didn't go so well, then it's tied to blame and shame, negative outcomes. Who wants to be part of it? Oh, we're having a debrief? I got to take some paid time off that day. Let me know when it's done. How about this question? How many people here have been formally trained on how to practice accountability? And that's a normal response. Would we agree that accountability is an important component to maximizing performance of a human team? Yeah. And why don't we train to how to do this in a positive, forward-focused way? My ambition is that after you leave here today, everybody is able to raise their hand and say, we got valid training that has significantly boosted our performance and is encouraging us to go forth and build stronger teams. Good. Now, the way that it works when you start learning how to fly airplanes is you'd like to hop into the airplane day one of pilot training, but that's not what takes place. What you do is you end up jumping into ground school first. You get into the books, you understand how come the airplane works, you get into the theory of flight, you understand weather, you understand the National Airspace System, blah, blah, all this stuff so that when you jump into the airplane, things go well. We're gonna jump into ground school here real quick. Bear with me for just a second. And ground school starts off with this picture. Anybody know what team this is? The Thunderbirds. Let me tell you, you get the A+ award. I've been asking this question for the last 4 months, and the Blue Angels PR is outstanding because 95% of respondents tell me that these are the Blue Angels. I like Branson. I like Branson a lot. Thunderbirds in their diamond formation. Hey, the Thunderbirds have 4 main objectives, the first of which is to inspire a young generation, a new generation of young men and women who want to come join the service. It's a pretty important task. We spend a lot of money on that particular mission because we want young men and women to want to come serve. And the way that the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels perform that particular mission and achieve that objective is by flying precisely. Now, the standard of performance for numbers 2, 3, and 4 over here is that they fly 18 inches away from the flight lead at all times. 18 inches. Think about that. Go look it up on YouTube. It's shocking how close that is. In changing flight conditions and in all kinds of different G loadings, and it's hard to do that well. 2, 3, and 4 over here, their responsibility is to stay in formation at all times. The flight lead knows this and is conscientious of that and has to lead with intent. Now, all 4 airplanes in this picture, they're the exact same make and model. It's the F-16 Fighting Falcon. And they're all powered by the exact same engine. But here's one thing that we learn in pilot training: no 2 engines perform the same. And because of this, the flight lead of this formation almost never goes to full power. The flight lead moderates the power so that everybody else can keep up. It's the same thing for how fast the flight lead rolls into maneuver or pulls back on the stick. Everything's done with the intent of giving everybody else on the team the ability to keep up. That's the standard. And what happens is after every practice, after every performance, the team gets together and they use accountability as a driver of performance. They know that they're going to be held to account for the decisions that they've made, for the way that they've done the work that they've done, and that's what helps them to constantly pursue excellence. I spoke to an audience 2 weeks ago in New Jersey where there was a former Thunderbird member, the first female opposing solo of the Thunderbirds. I asked her this question knowing what the outcome would be already. I said, how many perfect performances has the Thunderbirds ever flown? She said 0, without even a moment's hesitation. It's impossible to fly perfectly. But through regular debriefs, through regular accountability, they're always striving for it. And absent accountability, they're going to take a backward slide. And the way that they're able to use accountability is they say they know what the standard is, 18 inches. Today you were 20 inches away. We're going to use accountability to fix that gap to make tomorrow better. Good. So far, are you with me? Ground school making sense? Now let's go back in time and let's talk about a different way to use accountability. We go to the fields of France. We go back to the Great War, World War I. We take a look at a picture of great-grandpa hanging out next to a biplane in a really disruptive time in the history of the world. I'm curious, does anybody know who this gentleman is right here? Nice. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. Who is he? He was America's ace of aces of World War I. 26 aerial victories. That's a huge accomplishment, especially given the fact that the U.S. formally entered the war late in the game. And by the way, here's something interesting about fighter combat in World War I. The average life expectancy for a fighter pilot in that war was 3 weeks. Think about the implications of leading an organization where turnover is driven by death or capture every 3 weeks. Think about this as well. You had young men leaving U.S. shores to go to France who had never flown an airplane before, and they were doing on-the-job training in the midst of a global war. That's a tough place to do well. And there was an incentive to be an outstanding individual performer. If you got 5 aerial victories, your face was on the front page of the local newspaper, you're going to win an award, you might even get some cash. The Germans were the first to say it's not about individual achievement. We've got to field a team that can win. It turns out it was the Germans who were the first to turn to accountability to drive team performance. And what they said was, what we've got to do is figure out after every mission, by way of an accountability mechanism, what allowed certain people to survive today. And we're going to take that theory, that hypothesis, we're going to factor that into planning for the next mission. We're going to go out there and execute the next mission and test it and see if we can eventually evolve into a standard of performance. Now, this Great War scenario has implications on us today. Has anybody here had to make a change to how you do what you do as a result of this global pandemic called COVID-19? Yeah. And so we get to a Vietnam War veteran, Dr. Robert Cooper. He's a neuroscientist. He works to build strong teams and says right now, today, it's not about tactical proficiency, it's about how fast we learn. That's a big deal for us. But here's an implication to how it is we practice accountability in the midst of ongoing learning. Unlike the Thunderbirds, who have a known standard, 18 inches, and they can recognize a deficiency and debrief against the known standard. In World War I, there was no such thing as a standard. We were a decade removed from Kitty Hawk, North Carolina at the outset of the war. The Wright brothers, the Wright flyer, neither side knew how to use an airplane as an instrument of war. And so they couldn't come back after the mission and say, you should have known this, you should have done it this way, because there is no you should have, and this is the standard. When we're using accountability to learn, we have to recognize, we have to shift how we talk about performance and realize that we expect to make mistakes, we expect to fail, and it's through failure that we're eventually going to arrive at a new standard. And that's an important takeaway for us, not only in the business side of things, but also as we recognize how to apply accountability at home with our home teams, our families. We'll talk more about that in a second. Now, you've already hit on it. Somebody over here said, hey, it takes time to practice accountability. I was doing a virtual session last summer for a group of people interested in learning how to debrief to win. And the founder, former CEO, chairman of the board of a company that was in the midst of exploding internationally, leans back in his comfy chair in his comfy office and says, all of this stuff is great, but Rob, here in the real world, we're too busy selling to practice accountability. Now just think about this for 1 second. In the real world, Cujo, we're too busy selling to hold ourselves accountable. Think about the implications of that. For those of us that have been privileged to experience explosive growth over the last 18 months, for those of us who have opened new locations, brought on new hires, maybe haven't had the opportunity to meet all of them face to face because of where they are, think about this. How are we guarding our virtue in the midst of rapid expansion, rapid growth? And you look at the names of companies over here who in the midst of incredible sales victories sort of lost their way. I was studying, this is what was going on in my mind as that former CEO said that we're too busy selling to practice accountability. I was thinking about these companies. I was thinking about some of the case studies. I was thinking about Wells Fargo. Great company, storied history. So many of my friends have worked and still work at Wells Fargo. They got taken away by selling. They specifically emphasized we're going to cross-sell to existing customers to drive greater revenues. Some people on the team took it as we're going to take any means necessary to cross-sell to existing customers to include fraudulently signing documents, legal documents on customers' behalf. People bought things that they didn't know that they were buying. When the scandal came to light, as these things so often do, the CEO was called to task. CEO comes back and says, hey, it's not a cultural issue here at Wells Fargo. We just had some bad employees. Is that taking absolute ownership? Probably not, as I see you shake your heads no. You know how many just some bad employees Wells Fargo fires? 2,400. It's not just some isolated small thing, and that's the danger of us being too busy to practice accountability. One of the things that I advocate for, one of the things we work with you with, is to establish rules of engagement that help us to make sure that we guard our virtue always, and accountability is our primary mechanism of making sure that when we win, we do it in accordance with who we intend to be, which is just as important, maybe even more so than actually winning. And the final point about this notion of time is, are we really spending our time wisely every week? I'm going to ask you several times today to carve out some time this afternoon or tomorrow morning to think on what it is that we're exploring today, to start to make necessary micro changes to drive big results. One of the things we might want to take a look at is, are we getting a good return on our investment of time from the things that we do each week, the meetings that we hold, the rituals that we participate in? And then we can compare and contrast that with opportunities that we've got. Now to independent analysis about the way that the military practices accountability, this thing called a debrief. Two researchers who have no connection to the military that I can find whatsoever. They do a meta-analysis. They study the effectiveness of the military accountability model, and here's what they say. It is a significant boost on performance. They say it's 20 to 25% boost. I think that number's low. The version of debrief that they were using was a very unsophisticated version. I think we can get better than this, but guess what? This justifies us being here today to explore this particular topic. Would you agree with me? Now we get back into the world that I love. Does anybody here know what airplane this is? You're good people. You're very, very good people. He gets 2 gold stars today, and yes, this is the F-15E. This is the cousin of the airplane that I flew. I thought this was such a beautiful picture, I had to show it. A couple of details about the F-15 that you might find interesting, especially since this is a Missouri-built product, hand-assembled in the production lines, McDonnell Douglas, St. Louis, Missouri. You got more horsepower coming out of the back end of this thing than the entire starting lineup of the Indianapolis 500. If you're tired coming into work and then you go strap into one of these things and plug in the afterburners, you're awake. You've got more firepower coming off the air-to-air version of this than an entire SEAL platoon. When you pull back on the stick, you're almost instantly at 9 times the force of gravity. That has a physiological impact. The blood wants to rush from your brain into your extremities, and it does so. You've got to fight to stay awake and make high-quality decisions in that kind of a G-load. Oh, by the way, let's talk performance effectiveness. This airplane's 104 to nothing in combat. They tell you when you're going through F-15 school, don't be the jerk who screws it up. Now, let's think about this. What is the approval mechanism for shooting one of the missiles or dropping one of the bombs off the Strike Eagle version of this airplane? Who has to approve the pilot making the decision to do that? If you say no one, you're correct. It's expected that the 25-year-old who's flying this thing over hostile skies is going to get it right. 25-year-old is going to get it right using one of these missiles to shoot an enemy of the nation in a volatile, uncertain, disruptive environment. How do we do that? How is that possible? The answer is we know that we're going to be held to account for the decisions we've made, and it drives higher quality decisions. Let's look at this from another standpoint. This is the cockpit of the F-15, the version that I flew, the C model, the single-seat version, the way it used to look. It looks a little bit more sophisticated these days. You want to know what's intimidating? Being 24 years old and hopping into this thing for the first time. And you ask yourself, am I ever going to be able to do this right? And you go to Tyndall Air Force Base and your instructors say, Lieutenant, you have one responsibility, and that is to come prepared. And we're going to assess your preparedness every day after the mission by way of our post-mission debrief. And we have a responsibility as well. It's to come prepared to teach you. And we're going to assess how well we did that every day post-mission in the post-mission debrief. And you know what? That system works. 6 months after hopping into this thing and feeling intimidated by the 250 different knobs and dials and switches, I not only walked out of Tyndall Air Force Base qualified, I felt confident. So confident that I thought my teammates were blessed to have me, right? Until they said, shut up and learn. Today's about teams. Today's about driving team performance. The way that we're going to get to team performance is we're going to explore the concepts that I wrote about in my first book, Debrief to Win. What's interesting about the book? It was my effort to reverse engineer how come an Air Force fighter squadron consistently gets it right. And think about this. Not only do we fly in a really volatile world, not only is it really difficult to assess who's good, who's not, when closing velocities, when we're merging with threats at over 1,500 miles an hour and immediately going to 9 times the force of gravity, and decisions now have consequences 10 seconds later that are life and death. But we've got constant personnel turnover. Just about the time that we get somebody competent and qualified as an instructor or as a senior flight lead, the Air Force says, good, nice job, this person's leaving. And we're lucky if we get a replacement and the replacement's fresh out of school. How come we don't drop bombs on the wrong target, we don't shoot down friendlies in the midst of ongoing combat operations? And make no mistake, the Air Force has been at it since Desert Storm. That's what Debrief to Win is all about. And what I found is that there's a decided ecosystem in a fighter squadron that's really good to understand so that we can replicate that in our businesses. And the ecosystem starts with understanding, defining, driving what it is that is our purpose, and taking that all the way through and living that purpose day in and day out by way of our team life cycle. How it is that we plan, how it is that we communicate the plan, how it is that we execute the plan, how it is that we debrief our performance. Today, we're going to touch on many of these components at varying levels of depth. What I'll tell you is that everything that I'm sharing with you today is going to be available to you today. Yes, I've caught up to the current world. QR codes are really, really cool. I've got it up here right now. Those of you who are familiar with how to use this, go right ahead right now. For those who need a little bit of extra help, which is typically me, by the way, I'll have this back up again at the end of our session, and it'll stay here until I leave, and I'll leave here after the last person does. Is that fair? Good. You're going to get the slides. You're going to get a quick how-to manual, and I've asked my teammate to include Chapter 6 of my book, Debrief to Win. That may be coming to you tomorrow. All right, he had a car incident this morning that's driving him to be a little bit behind. But you know what else I found? In teaching for over 25 years, it's one thing for me to be up on a stage like I've been to this point this morning, droning on, It's another thing entirely for us to experience learning together. And I personally think that option B is much more powerful. One of the things that we do in the flying world is we go into the simulator and we simulate the experience of flying so that we get lessons there that drive performance where it really counts. Today, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to divorce ourselves of the companies and the businesses that we're a part of, and we're going to jump into collectively simulator training environment here in this beautiful convention space here in beautiful Branson, Missouri. And what we're going to do in the simulator today is we're going to begin to understand the ecosystem that drives performance in a fighter squadron. Specifically, we're going to talk about expectations. Specifically, we're going to talk about teams. Specifically, we're going to talk about team life cycles. And it's my intent for us to finish on time. I'm passionate, so passionate about what we're talking about that I could easily go until late tonight. But I tell you what, Mrs. Teschner would be very, very angry at me if I did that. She's expecting me to come and help out with the kiddos this afternoon, so we'll finish on time. But in order for this part to work, we need some bold participants. And I need to get off the stage. And so what I'm looking for this morning is for 4 bold people to help advance our understanding of how to up our accountability game to drive team performance and make our teams stronger. I need 4 of you to step forward and to join me here in the front of the room. And I promise you I don't bite, and I promise you, having done this so many times, that it's so valuable for everybody. So who'd like to come over here and join me this morning? Only 4 people. That's it. Come on down. Thank you. We only need 3 more people. There's already a bit of a sigh of relief. Who are the additional 3 that are going to come down here and join me? We only need 2 more people. We only need 1 more. I think we've got it. I think we've got. How about a round of applause for 4 bold folks who are willing to come over here and join us? Outstanding. How about fist bumps? I don't know what the rules of engagement are over here, so we'll go kind of safe. Hey, it's good to meet you all this morning. Okay, you were the first person who came down here. You've got a name tag on you. Ron, good. Phil, Martha, Abby. Awesome. Okay, remember, you don't work wherever you work, okay? Today you work here at Company X. And here at Company X, we've convened this august body because we have a very special project that we've got to work through. And you're going to be the project team that works us through this, and you're going to be the team leader. As the boldest of the bold, the person who came down here first, okay? All right, so you're going to be the team leader. Ron, you're also going to be in charge of marketing this morning, okay? Phil, you've got entertainment this morning. Martha, you have accounting and finance this morning. And Abby, you've got logistics this morning. Good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for the Jimmy's Birthday Party Planning Team? Jimmy's Birthday Party Planning Team. Good. Here's a couple of things that you need to know, Mr. Team Leader, as we set to plan this thing effectively. We're in a post-COVID world right now, okay? So COVID-19 has been conveniently eradicated, which is really, really nice. That's cause for joy. And it's especially nice because the party is 4 days from today. That's when this birthday takes place, all right? And we haven't planned a thing yet. So there's a bit of an urgency here to get this thing done, all right? And time is not on our side. Here's something that you need to know as our accounting and finance lead. I'm going to send you a Venmo here in a couple of potatoes. That Venmo contains $300. That's your budget for this, and that's what you're really interested in, right? And then Abby, as our logistician this morning, I'm going to send you an email. The email contains the list of 30 prospective invitees. You've got the names, you got the phone numbers, you got the contact information, physical address, email addresses for all 30. They're split 50-50 boy, girl, just so that you know, and you don't have to invite everybody. Now, for the rest of us that were slightly less bold this morning, we have a role here, and the role right now is to observe, all right? There will be an opportunity for follow-on engagement for you as well. I know that you're happy to know this. But for right now, please, no comments from the gallery. For you, one of the things about my background is that I can't tell you the stories that were told at my naming. So you're gonna have to guess as to why it is that my tribe called me Cujo. But if you're familiar with Stephen King, you might have a good guess. The story about a rabid Saint Bernard may have factored in. And so there's one additional constraint. You've got 4 minutes to put this thing together. I've reset my stopwatch. I'm going to give you the minute-by-minute countdown, and we will be pencils down at the 4-minute mark. Now, the reason why I've handed you microphones is so that each two of you can kind of talk into those so that the rest of us can hear you. It's going to be important for the follow-on work. Okay, Ron, you're the team leader. You ready to rock and roll with this thing? Born for this, he says. Thanks, Cooch, for the opportunity. Okay, your time starts now. Go.
I'll hire the clowns,
You are entertainment. We don't have the money for that. You are the clown.
volunteer clowns. I got it.
What type of clowns are we gonna have?
Scary clowns.
Scary. I don't know if the little girls are gonna like that. They might want princesses instead.
Okay, I can do that.
Is this a boys' party or a girl?
We have 50-50 boys and girls, but we don't have to invite everyone.
It's Jimmy's birthday.
Jimmy, it's Jimmy.
Okay.
But
Identifying as a him, he.
That is correct, yes.
little boy's birthday party, and there's 50-50 boy-girl attendance.
Well, marketing
Potentially.
should be pretty easy because who doesn't like a party?
But
What
they,
kind of food are you gonna have? How much is it gonna
What
cost?
time of day?
1 o'clock,
Okay, why do you say that?
because we can serve a later lunch, so it doesn't have to be as filling, because they could feed them
3
ahead of
minutes,
time.
3 minutes remaining.
Cake and punch?
Yes,
That'll be
always
cheaper. We
cake.
can afford that in the budget.
Absolutely.
Party favors? We could put
I
that in the budget.
I can juggle.
You
Juggle.
can juggle, okay. That'll save on the budget.
Face painting could be like a gift. Send home with the parents.
Okay, so.
No cost. We can use my wife's old makeup.
I'm sure she has a lot of it.
Okay, so 4 days to invite, so we need to get something out right now.
Yes.
Electronic?
I have the email addresses of all the kids and their parents. I guess the kids don't have emails, but their parents probably do.
So how are we gonna put some sizzle behind this to bait them in?
Can we make a video of the clown to have the clown be the invite and the inviter?
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
What are we missing?
Who's gonna go out and buy the stuff? Logistics.
2 minutes,
The
2 minutes
accountant is gonna
remaining.
Do all the shopping.
With
We need an
logistics.
RSVP, so we know how to buy, how much to buy, and make
They
sure
have
that we're
2
staying within
days to
budget.
RSVP.
Okay.
Okay. What else? Where are we at?
We know what we're buying food wise.
So
Are
the
we
event,
inviting
the
all 30
place,
people?
The place.
The
What do
place.
we gotta do to get ready to house 30 people? Because now we've got the whole distancing thing we have to worry about, cleanliness.
Have we included decorations? Will we need to?
90 seconds.
Include that in the budget,
Yes,
okay?
you have $50.
Okay, $50 in decorations,
Mhm.
$50 in food. We got a lot of money left over, so we still have
Hand
$200.
sanitizer.
Hand
Our-
sanitizer.
No, we're past COVID-19. Remember, it finished. We are not experiencing COVID-19
Okay,
anymore.
That's great. And we'll put that in our invite.
I think we'll have to up the food budget because food's
Okay.
more important.
$100 for food.
I think that
How
sounds good.
much for party favors?
1 minute remaining.
4 days from now.
I got a buddy with a barn and a pond. We got it.
Perfect.
All right. We still have some money left over, so
45 seconds.
The take-home stuff, the party.
Party
favors.
favors.
party favors, we'll have 50 to 100, $50 to $75 in party favors.
The dollar store, Dollar General.
And our accountant is doing all the shopping.
30 seconds.
Let's have a party.
Now, is there anything left? We gotta be missing something. This has been too easy.
20
You're in
seconds.
charge.
Well, I'm just asking the questions right now.
See you guys at noon on the day of the party. We'll get it set up.
15 seconds.
All right, I think we're ready to go to task, Coach.
Ready to go to task with 10 seconds remaining. How about a round of applause for the Jimmy's birthday party planning team? Good. You can leave your microphones down over here on the stage. Maybe turn them off before you put them down, just to be on the safe side, and you can return to your seats. Thank you very, very much. That was interesting. It always is interesting. Okay, let's get back into this thing. Sir, if you could bring my slide deck back up, I'd appreciate it. We have defined one term this morning. We've defined accountability a couple of ways, but I started by teaching you how it is that we teach accountability at the VMAX group. Does anybody here remember how I defined accountability to start off today? Taking absolute ownership for the outcomes that we've achieved. Good. We talked about the challenges here, right? We said this is hard. There's a time impact, but potentially there's also a cultural impact. We've got people sitting across the table from us who might be full of excuses, counter-accusations, blame, deflections, and now we want them to step up and take absolute ownership for the outcome that the team achieved. How do we do that? It sounds nice. How do we get there day in and day out, the employees that we're privileged to lead? We've talked about this term a bunch of times. Now what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what it means and how we ritualize it. In a fighter squadron, we've learned all the way back in 1917 that our ritual for accountability is something that we call the debrief. In the information that you're going to download by way of these cool things called QR codes, you're going to get the following definition. And this is the definition of what a debrief is. This is what I wrote in my book, Debrief to Win. A debrief. It's the constructive evaluation of the quality of the decisions and associated actions that we're making in relationship to the objectives that we set out to achieve. And goodness, is that a mouthful. So let's repeat that a couple of times, and let's actually break it down into its component parts. Constructive evaluation, that's the first part. What does constructive mean? If you look up the term, you're going to find that it means tending to build up. A debrief done well builds team cohesiveness. A debrief done well is positive and forward-focused. A debrief done well might be, you say, a place where we coach our teammates to be their best by using means that get to the heart and soul of why we care to improve. The ideal outcome of a debrief done well is that the team that has just experienced a loss or a failure is able to high-five one another, walking out of the debrief room saying tomorrow is going to be better. Our ethic in a fighter squadron, just so you know, is tomorrow is always going to be better than today. If we won today, we're going to win again tomorrow, and we're going to hopefully win bigger. If we lost today, we now understand why. We're going to fix it, and tomorrow we're going to win. It's a remarkably resilient organization, the U.S. Air Force Fighter Squadron. And it comes to the fact that we learn how to do constructive evaluation of what it was that took place. That's the first part. And it's something that I don't see too often in the various ways we practice accountability in the various businesses that I'm spending time with these days. So there's an opportunity for growth potentially there. Second component, what we want to do is assess the decision quality. We're looking at the decision quality that drives the actions that people take. And here's where sometimes somebody in the audience says, Cujo, I appreciate that. In a fighter squadron, maybe that's how it works. But over here, we're tracking KPIs. It's about revenue and growth. It's about numbers, which are outcomes. So your approach doesn't work. Hang on for just a second. Let's talk about the combat space. Let's talk about the battlefield. Let's talk about how the U.S. Army War College describes combat. The U.S. Army War College says that the battle space is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. They've created, as the Army is so good at doing, an acronym. They say it's VUCA. I've been in the business world now for a number of years. What I've found is that it's the exact same. And if we haven't figured out in the midst of COVID-19 that it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex and ambiguous, we've been in a cave with our head buried in the sand for the last year and a half. Now, these terms mean something. It's not just a nice, happy platitude that the Army War College is using. Each one of those terms has a definite meaning, and I'm going to focus in on complexity. And I'll tell you that there's a whole field of study called complexity science. And if you go and you get into that, what you're going to find is, among many interesting observations, that in a complex world, decision quality doesn't necessarily equal outcome quality. And we've all been there. We've all been there where we've made a high-quality decision and still lost. You would agree? And the opposite also holds true. We've been there where we've made a horrible decision and somehow still won. I've been there a lot of times. And what we say to ourselves is that we got really lucky today. And when we made a high-quality decision and things didn't go well, we say we got really unlucky. And we use the term luck to describe why it is that decision quality doesn't always equal outcome quality. Now, in practical execution, I'll tell you, as an instructor pilot at the weapons school, I have passed students on rides where we did not achieve mission objectives. And the reason is we made all the right decisions, we just got violently unlucky that day. And I didn't want those students to change something the next time out. The opposite also holds true. I have failed students on rides where we accomplished the mission objectives. And it stings when that happens. But they understood that today we made horrible decisions and got violently lucky, and that's not the way that we want to go forward into war. And what we've learned in the fighter world for over a century is that the only piece that we can control day in and day out is the quality of the decisions that we're making. And so we're always trying to understand why did we make the decisions that we did so that we can drive better decision making so that over the long haul, we're typically going to have the outcomes that we want. Anybody here play poker? Poker, any poker players here? I would imagine in this town, probably a few. Yes, okay, good. Here's what you find. In poker, we guard against resulting. Resulting is where we change strategy just because this time we didn't get the desired outcome. We know that that's a bad way to go into poker. Same concept, because both deal with complexity. The final piece of this entire description ties to the need for objectives. We have to understand what were we here to do, to understand whether or not we did it. We say in the flying business that an objective has to be measurable, it's got to be achievable, it's got to be time constrained for it to be a valid objective. And so when we put all this together, and we say the debrief is the constructive evaluation of the quality of the decisions that drove our actions in relationship to our objectives, now we've got something with some oomph. And the way that I wrote about it in my book, Debrief to Win, is I created an acronym. The Air Force did actually come from the Army. My acronym is RAPTOR, and it's a 6-step methodology that allows us to be able to debrief successfully, day in and day out, no matter what domain, no matter what business, no matter what team we choose to do this with. 6 steps plus a little bit extra. You'll get that from me. Once my teammate recovers from the car issue, he'll load that up into the system, and you'll get that as part of the email follow-up. Chapter 6 of my book is all the methodology chapter. But what I've also noticed is that sometimes even 6 steps can feel onerous. And in the heat of the moment, it becomes difficult for us to apply that sometimes. So let me share with you how it is we've adapted this RAPTOR methodology in different industries, and maybe you can take away something there that's most useful to you. Let's talk about the construction company that we're working with right now. CEO for the construction company reaches out and says, hey, Cujo, I've got a challenge. I've got a great executive leadership team here. Everybody is passionate about the work that we do. They're committed to excellence. But there's sometimes when I come in and I say, hey, listen, I need this done by next Wednesday, and I need this done by next Thursday, and I need this other thing done by this Thursday, and the next Thursday comes and I ask them, hey, where's the stuff? Where's the stuff? Where's the stuff? And I get a bunch of blank stares. And maybe then I get the pushback of, I'm sorry, I haven't even started working on that. I've been so stinking busy, I couldn't even get around to doing that thing. And the CEO says, I understand, because we are busy around here, but at the end of the day, I need to make progress, and I need my team to do what it is that they need to do. Because Cujo, how are we going to fix this? I said, well, the answer is we've got to increase the frequency that we practice accountability. He goes, no. We don't have time for that. We're really busy around here. I go, I caught that the first time. And then he said, here's an added wrinkle. We're going to take on more projects this summer than we've ever taken on before. So we're about to turn the spigot up, which means we're going to be even more busy. So how can we fix this? I said, well, reference my previous answer. We've got to increase the frequency of accountability. He goes, reference mine. We don't have time for that. I said, I disagree. Here's how we broke apart RAPTOR, and here's how we made meaningful progress. They gave themselves 5 weeks to get done with the backlog of tasks that hadn't been accomplished while they were adding more to the mix. What we started doing was every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning, a 15-minute huddle at the beginning of the day. The standard says only 15 minutes to honor people's time. The purpose of the huddle, to take a look at the day to figure out what are we going to erase from the schedule to give people the opportunity to get their work done. Is there a meeting that's not driving value? If so, cancel the meeting. Is there a meeting that you don't need to go to? If so, don't go there. so that we can accomplish the things that we know that we need to do. And we've got a master list of things that need to get done. And the master list, we're tracking with green, yellow, and red accomplishment of tasks. Green says it's done. Yellow says it's tracking to be done on time. Red says it's not started or it's not going to be done on time. At the end of the day, we've got a 10-minute status check. And all that we want to hear, and our standard is 90 seconds per employee maximum. If something's red that should be green, what are you going to do to fix it tomorrow? I don't need to hear an excuse, a justification. I don't need a counter-accusation. I don't need blame of anybody. I want to know what we're going to do to fix this thing tomorrow. It took them 5 weeks to get caught up. That now is the standard that they use to deal with the increased throughput to allow them to achieve mission success, which ends up being a version of Raptor scaled appropriately to help the team knock it out of the park. That's one version. Then let me share you this little story. I was down in Texas. We did a full day training event with a really, really cool team that's got branches all throughout the state. And at the end of the day, the CEO asked me, hey, Cujo, how can I apply Raptor in my interactions with my wife? I said, well, okay. If by Raptor you mean this methodology of how to debrief, my first suggestion is don't. Like, don't say, uh-oh, we've got a big crisis over here. Let me whip out my methodology checklist and let's start with step one. I don't think that's going to be very effective. And so we refined the 6-step process. We made it into 4. And here's what I share with you right now. We call it the 4 Fs. Any debrief starts with the first F. What is the first F? We have to understand the facts of what it was that took place. Facts. There we go. What were the facts? Now here's something, and I'm looking at a lot of experienced leaders in this room who have become accustomed to trusting the gut. We've learned to make decisions based upon limited information. We're happy to execute based upon that limited information, and usually we get it right. And we're not alone. Colin Powell, former Secretary of State, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that guy said, give me 30% of the information and I'll come up with an accurate plan. Pretty impressive. When we get to the debrief, we have to divorce ourselves of the inclination to believe that we have enough facts to have an accurate accountability session. And one of the things that we as leaders have to understand is we don't have exclusive rights to the facts. And so I share with you right now, the debrief is a collaborative effort. The debrief is one where we come with our understanding of what took place and we contrast that and add to it with the understanding that the other members of our team bring into the mix. A debrief done well has a debrief lead who says, hey, here's what I remember happening at the kickoff of our sales campaign 6 weeks ago. What have I already missed? What are the details that you remember that I haven't yet? What have I gotten wrong so far? And now we introduce new voices to the conversation and we say we value everybody's perspective. Here's a rule of thumb for you. If you have only 10 minutes to execute a debrief, spend 5 minutes on gathering facts. My experience working in companies says you won't do it. We're so inclined as leaders and as doers to jump out there and fix what we perceive to be the problem right now without taking the time to assess what the actual facts were, and that costs us. It costs us in terms of effectiveness. It costs us in terms of team dynamics. I'm here to tell you, I suffer the same affliction. This is a learned response. We have to be very disciplined on the fact-gathering phase. So 10 minutes for a debrief, 5 minutes on facts. Which brings us then to the next F, focus. What's our focus? What question do we want to answer? How are we going to use our time wisely here? Now, the focus is driven by our objectives. Let's say here at Company X, we set the following objective a week ago. Let's sell 5 widgets in 5 days. Now, 5 days into this whole thing, we're assessing how did we do? And we find out from the facts that we sold 6. Our focus ought to be, why did we outperform our objective? In a fighter squadron, we don't take success for granted. I say again, we do not take success for granted. So often in business, I hear the expectation is that we get it right. So that's the reason why we only use accountability when we don't. I would come back and say, do we know why we got it right? Was it because of us or did we get lucky? Are we celebrating the heroics that enabled us to win today? And so we're going to scrutinize this thing. If we outperform the objective, we're going to ask why. And if we underperform, let's say we only sold 4 widgets in 5 days, we're going to ask why didn't we sell enough widgets? Either of those is the valid question that we're here in the debrief to assess, because the objective is the yardstick against which we're measuring ourselves. And if we crafted a good objective, figuring out our focus, that takes a couple of seconds. I'll give you 15 in a 10-minute debrief, just in case. So right now, we're halfway through the debrief process. We've spent 5 minutes and 15 seconds getting here, which brings us to our third F, framing. What are we framing in a debrief? We're framing the root cause. Every debrief has implicit within it root cause analysis. How familiar are we with root cause analysis here? Show of hands. Root cause analysis is something that you do? Okay, good. For those who aren't as familiar, go look up Toyota Production System's 5 Whys. Google search for 5 Whys. You're going to come up with so much information about how it is that we dig for substantive answers to our why question. Wonderful, wonderful methodology. But here's what I would tell, for those of us that already practice root cause analysis, let me tell you a couple of problems with it, from my perspective as the Air Force's chief debriefer. Number one, it's sterile. It doesn't really look at context that much. And number two, it leads to blame. It's a sterile, blame-focused methodology that's ultimately going to root out, okay, Vicki, turns out you're the one that made the egregious mistake today that hijacked the process. Vicki's a friend. I can pick on her, I think, right? Yeah, okay, good. Whew. If root cause analysis is sterile and blame-focused, then why do we do it? We have to get to a substantive answer. But how we talk about that substantive answer, that's on us as leaders, which gets us to framing. Let me give you a quick, let me just walk you through a quick 5 Whys, just for those who aren't as familiar, and then we'll talk about framing. Let's say that I showed up late to today's presentation. Let's say I was 40 minutes late. Bruce is the person who reached out to me and said, hey, Cujo, would you please come over here to be part of this today? My guess is Bruce is going to be reaching out to me when I don't show up on time and say, Cujo, what gives? And I'm going to text back to him and say, hey, Bruce, I'm so sorry. I'm working it. You know, keep things going. I'll be there. Looks like I'm going to be 40 minutes late. I show up. He's cool. He tap dances. He and Jeff work through a bunch of stuff. And then suddenly I arrive. We do today's workshop. We're done. There's some happy claps. And then you know Bruce is going to pull me aside and go, dude, what's up, right? And I come back and I say, Bruce, I am mortified. I'm so sorry about being so horrifically late today. The root cause is I ran out of gas getting here. And I just feel so bad. What do we do with that? What is the follow-up to the, hey, Cujo just identified the fact that he ran out of gas getting here from wherever he came from? What do you say, sir? What's your debrief feedback to me this morning? What were you doing last night, he asks. He wants to dig into the why. So often, we fall victim to the trap of treating the last thing that happened prior to a failure as its root cause, and we're just satisfied with it. And we offer feedback like, hey, Cujo, how about you tank up the night prior so that you have gas the next day? We go, oh, yeah, that sounds good, right? But you don't fall victim to that. You want to understand. Maybe the question is, Cujo, when did you recognize that you were low on gas? I come back and say, as soon as I cranked up this morning. Cujo, were there any gas stations between wherever you came from and here? I come back and say, yeah, there are gas stations, of course. It's the United States of America. And he says, okay, why didn't you stop at one? And I come back and say, well, I didn't have any money. And he goes, what? You didn't have any money? Cooch, what gives, man? Why don't you have any money? I might say, well, I was gambling at the Maristar Casino yesterday evening. And because he cares, he digs a little bit deeper and goes, hey, Cooch, how many nights during the work week are you out there at the Maristar gambling? And I go, it's every night, brother. That's what I do. Now, we've stumbled upon pay dirt, a substantive answer to the why, one that allows us to make meaningful progress moving forward. We're not just going to be satisfied with tank up the night prior. We recognize I've got a gambling affliction. I don't. That's driving my performance issues. If we just deal with the last thing that happened, I've still got the gambling problem, and we don't know how it's going to manifest itself tomorrow. That's 5 Whys. in a nutshell. Now, let me tell you, I saw a company, I worked with one once. The principal came up to me and said, hey, Cujo, can you help us? Can you help us to get better? I said, well, what's the starting point? He said, well, we're one of the best branches of our company in the nation. Like in all the metrics that our headquarters tracks, we're in the top 3 to 15. Other branches come to study us. That's how good we are. I mean, I appreciate the interest in constant improvement, but why are you not satisfied? He goes, Cujo, we're staying static. We're not getting any better. Some quarters we even take a step backwards, and then we've got to chase our tails to figure out how to move forward. I said, do you practice accountability? He goes, all the time. We pride ourselves on our accountability. I said, good, let me watch how you practice it, and then I'll tell you if I can help you. And so he invited me in Q1 to watch their Q4 metrics review session, their accountability practice. And here's what I witnessed. I witnessed a young leader stand up and say, you'll notice we did not hit the mark in Q4, pointing at the metrics. The root cause was Christmas caught us by surprise. We could not get the activity in that we needed to. We anticipate a strong Q1 because now we're post-holiday. Now at the time, I was just a couple of years removed from the Air Force. I had to stifle a chuckle about the comment, Christmas caught us by surprise. Only because as a student of history, and as a person who lives life on our great planet, I'm aware of the fact it's been happening for over 2,000 years. Now, what kind of pushback did that person get from their root cause? Zero. Zero. Nobody challenged that. Caught you by surprise? Are you kidding me? Lord willing, it's going to happen again this year. What are we going to do there? After that session, I told the principal, absolutely, can I help you? Let's learn some root cause analysis and let's practice it immediately. It took them 1 quarter to get their best results in 6.5 years, just by learning how to dig for the substantive why. But now we come back to the fact that at the end of the day, root cause analysis can be sterile and blame focused. So how do we talk about that substantive answer in a positive, forward focused way that causes the team to want to high five on their way out of the debrief room? It's how we frame it. Here's an illustration of framing for your consideration. Let's say we went to the local supermarket to go buy some yogurt this morning. And there were 2 brands of yogurt that had the exact same flavor and content to include the exact same price. The only thing that was different was the way that the yogurt was packaged. Brand A said 10% fat content. Brand B said 90% fat-free. Which brand do we buy? Of course, I've yet to have anybody stand up and say, Cujo, it's 10% fat, always. 90% fat-free draws us in. And even though mathematically we understand and appreciate the fact that both have the exact same fat content, talking about it in a positive way draws us. Now let me take you back to my evolution as a young fighter pilot. Let me tell you about a mission that I flew at Eglin Air Force Base as a young pup, learning how to lead 3 other pilots into combat. There were 4 of us bringing in a bomber deep into simulated bad guy land against 6 adversaries. The adversaries came from our squadron. They were my friends. You know the mission didn't go well when the adversaries come in afterwards and go, Cujo, we feel so bad for you. It was one of the most horrible missions I've ever flown. And we went in and I led the debrief. It lasted about 3.5 hours, and all it was nonstop negativity. Me coming in talking about how bad I did, me talking about how bad they did, me talking about how bad everything was. And on the heels of my 3.5 hour super mega negativity session, my instructor, a guy that I still revere, gets to debrief me on my performance. So I sit down, he stands up, and he has 2 observations for me. Observation number 1, he says, Cujo, I don't know if there's enough counseling in the entire world to help me to rebound from how you made me feel today. We got to work on that. I'm like, oh, that's not good. That's not good for the grade sheet. I said, here's the second observation, and this is the one that I'd like you to take note of. I said, Cujo, do you realize we were 2 decisions away from victory today? After 3.5 hours of talking about and beating us up over all the different mistakes we made, he comes in and says, we were 2 decisions away from victory. And if you could imagine these sideboards right now being the reconstruction of the facts of our mission, he goes, yeah, right over here, Cujo. would you agree with me that if you had gone left and not right, you would have been exactly where you needed to be to take care of that part of the enemy? I go, absolutely. He goes, do you understand why you should have made the decision to go left, not right? I go, I think I do. He goes, could you make that decision better tomorrow? I go, yeah, absolutely. He goes, good. And right over here, would you agree that if I had gone right, not left, I would have been exactly where I needed to have been? I go, yep. He goes, you understand why? I go, I think I do. He goes, could you help influence my decision tomorrow if we find ourselves in the same situation? I go, I think so. He goes, awesome, brother. You've got this thing. Go out there and win. He high-fives me and he leaves. His debrief of my performance lasted less than 10 minutes, but guess what? On the heels of his conversation, I felt like I could actually do it. On the heels of mine, I was hanging my head in shame. How it is we frame what we learn is just as important as what we learn. If we want to focus on positive team building, forward progress that builds buy-in and engagement, even in an accountability session. How long do we spend here? We're going to work right up until the 9-minute mark in our 10-minute debrief, which brings us to the final left, the way forward. What are we going to do with what it is we've just learned? We're going to hold ourselves accountable for doing something. If we won today, how are we going to guarantee that we're going to win tomorrow? If we lost today, what changes are we going to make so that tomorrow ends up being a happy day? 4 Fs. We can do this without even saying this is the first F. We can take this back to our spouse and go, hey, listen, I feel like there's some tension. You know, here's how I see the last few hours having gone. Like, here's my perspective of the truth. What am I missing? The spouse comes back and says, you're missing this and this and this. Okay, that makes sense to me now. Then I guess the question we need to answer is, why did I blah, 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 blah. And we can just go through the steps without having to say any of this stuff to find meaningful progress. My wife appreciates this, by the way. She's the advocate for it. We're going to talk about that again. Here's one other instructional point from my background as a fighter pilot that I'd share with you. If we wait until the outcome to have our first debrief, we're missing the mark. Debriefs en route to an outcome are how it is that we ensure we get the outcome that we want. Let me tell you something that I used to do at your fighter weapons school. When I was leading huge aerial armadas deep into really sophisticated simulated bad guy land, I would ask myself regularly in the midst of the mission, if we were to debrief ourselves right now, thumbs up or thumbs down? And if my internal assessment in my single seat cockpit was, we're at a thumbs down, I'd now ask myself, what decision can I make to get us back on track right now? For those who only do accountability after a failure, use this. Don't fail. That's the principle. If you've ever read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he talks about this. He calls them pre-mortems, doing the post-mortem before you have the outcome to get to the outcome that you want. Okay, good. There's some instructional stuff. Now, where is my Jimmy's birthday party planning team? You still here? Good. Your work is not yet done. Come on back. Come on back. It's too fun to pick on people in a public setting like this. Good. Everybody's here. The team leader's fired up. He knows this is going to be valuable. All right, team lead. Here's what's up. I've reset the stopwatch. You've got the microphones right back over there. You actually did a really good job of speaking pretty loud and allowing us to be able to follow along. This is going to be important that we are still able to follow along. Right now, you're going to lead your team through a 3-minute pre-debrief. And just to be clear, we're still 4 days away from the party. Just to be clear, we've almost literally just stopped planning for it. And now we're going to assess how are we tracking towards having a successful event. Okay? I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. If you would, please be intentional about speaking into the microphone so that we can hear you. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay, everybody, we've had, about 20 minutes since we were here. Has anybody had any thoughts of anything they wish they would have done or said differently?
I think that we can't rely on email communication only, so we need to have a backup, especially since it's a 4-day. We only have 4 days to get the RSVPs that we need, so we know what to do. We need to have step 1, step 2. So I think emails, and then if we don't get responses, that we have a team and a calling plan in order to confirm RSVPs.
So I can count on you to have that done.
How about 2 days ahead? Email out day 1, give them a day, and then 2 days out, I'll call people.
On the rest of the items that we were going to get, how do you feel about it?
refreshments are ordered. We'll be able to, yeah, in the last 20 minutes, got it done.
You haven't been paying attention. That's great. Okay, everything's ordered, right?
Yes.
And when do you expect it?
We will have it on site 2 hours beforehand.
Okay.
The setup for the party will have already taken place that morning. So refreshments will be there 2 hours before. the
How
party
are we going to
begins.
check on progress for that? Is there any milestones in between?
Yes, so the order having already been put in, we will check 24 hours in advance to make sure that everything is due to be delivered 2 hours in advance of the party.
And I can count on you for that.
Yes.
Okay, entertainment.
I'll be there.
Doing,
All that juggling stuff the clowns do.
okay.
Myself, a big smile.
What if something happens to you? Do we have any backup plan?
Yeah, I've got a friend who's coming. He's a co-clown, co-operator, and he's going to come along. And if something happens to me, then we got it covered.
Fantastic. And you're going to check in with him when?
The night before, but I'll be there 2 hours early to practice my juggling
I
and
can
smiling.
count on you for that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, what do you guys need from me for this to be successful?
Have you been to the event to ensure that we have like the location?
No, so you want me to do a flyover, so to speak?
Yes, please.
Double check the event. When do we need to have that done by?
I mean, I think a site visit would be great, but then probably
30
2 days
seconds.
before.
Okay, so I'm gonna check in with you guys in a day. I'll go take care of all that, take a look at the site, and I'll report back to you guys before close of business tomorrow. Are we good? What else are we missing? Do we need a script for the event itself on how it's gonna go?
Probably.
Okay, sounds very logistics to me.
Marketing communication does the writing for it though, but I can ensure that everyone has copies of their scripts.
Perfect. That's
Logistics.
3 minutes.
All right,
Your
thank you.
time is done. How about another round of applause for the Jimmy's birthday team? Nice. Please return to your seats. Awesome. Good. Now, I promised that those who weren't maybe as bold this morning were going to get an opportunity to engage. This is my follow-through on that promise. What I need from you is your assessment of how effective that debrief was. And here are the rules of engagement. When I call on you, I'd ask you to lead with your assessment by way of a score. We're going to use a 5-point scale where 5 equals most effective. So if you think that was the most effective sort of pre-debrief possible, then give that thing a 5, and then follow that up with a 10-second explanation of why you feel that way. Vicki, I need your help. Will you be my wingman right now? Will you take some notes for me? Will you keep track of scores and comments for me? That is outstanding. Okay, so who'd like to go first over here? Who wants to assess how effective that pre-debrief was? Why don't the double gold star award winner kick off this thing? How effective on that 5-point scale, and what's your 10-second summary as to why?
A 4.
4. Okay, good. Vicky's got that logged. Why a 4?
The site visit should occur immediately in case there's a problem and they need to find a different site. In terms of the food, you may have kids that have allergies, and I don't think that was assessed.
Okay, so if you had fixed those things, we'd have a 5, but otherwise pretty good on a 5-point scale. Thank you. Coming to you, you're sitting right over here.
I believe a 4 as well.
A 4 as well. Why 4?
They're missing out things. The cleanup, how old the Jimmy is. That takes consideration of the kids and the party favors.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that one. Now we got to go. Let's go down a little bit over here because we don't want to just do the outliers. We got you. You've already engaged. How about you? How effective was that pre-debrief, and why do you say that?
I would say it was probably a 4-2. I think they did a good job of kind of reviewing the flow of what they had going on and going through it. They probably missed a couple details here and there, but I think they did kind of cover it from top to bottom with some backups and contingencies is what they were going to do.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting, the human dynamic. Once you get kind of on a roll, you sort of stick with it. That's been my experience. I'd like a contrarian, please. I know we've got contrarians in this crowd. Who here would offer this as kind of a lower score? Who's got a lower score assessment? Come on, who wants to be that person? Come on, I know you're out here. Oh, there we go. Good. Thank you for being bold in your own way. David, what say you? How effective and why?
Probably about a 2 or 3. They didn't really focus on the objectives of it and weren't very positive going forward or anything.
Okay, awesome. So about a 2 or a 3. Which one is it? Is it a 2 or a 3?
Go with a 3.
It's a 3, okay, influenced by the 4 as we go up to a 3. How about one more? It's nice to have a good round 5. How about back over here? You've got opinions for sure. What say you, sir?
Well, I was actually looking at it as more of a 5 because without reading anything into the scenario, I believe that each person that was responsible for something had the opportunity to report out, gave the objectives that they still needed to accomplish, and the leader checked in to see what can I do as well. So I thought it flowed very well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, what you'll note is it's easy to sit back and observe, dare I say judge, when the pressure's not on. It's much harder to be part of the team. And actually, this little exercise is a pretty difficult one, especially when you're doing it in front of so many people who you don't even know. And now you're getting their feedback of the whole thing, and that's a tough spot too. And you're the leader. You're the first person to come up there. That took some guts this morning. You also deserve a voice right now. How do you self-assess the quality of the pre-debrief that you led your team through?
Well, I've got a great team to begin with. I don't even think they needed me there to go through it. They were all, but they're also brave too, because they stepped up and volunteered for that too. So that was kind of the hope, and that's what they came up with. 7 minutes is not very much time.
No, it's not.
When you put the two together.
What score do you give yourself?
I gave myself a 3, actually. Just mainly because, well, you don't know what you don't know. And I have never done a pre-debrief ever. And so I didn't even know really what the expectation was on that. So we were kind of calling that play on the field.
Awesome. Okay, good. Vicki, did we get all that chronicled and documented? You're awesome. Thank you so much for that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a natural stopping point. What do you say we take 15 minutes, go stretch the legs, get some coffee, hit the restrooms. We'll come back here. I'm a military kind of guy. We'll start on time, and we're going to unpack what it is we just experienced by way of this little exercise. Does that sound good to you? Good. If you would, please crank up the tunes, my friend.
Hello. Hello. All right. Okay. This is our 52-second warning. 50, 40. Well, you can count on your own. I will stop counting. Here we go. Real quick. I forgot to do this. I'm so sorry. There's this weird thing sitting in front of you. It's a lime you're not lime, and lemon. Some of you just have lemons. Who just has lemons in front of them? Okay. Okay. We're going to take note of that. Who just has limes in front of them? Okay, yeah, a lot of you. Okay, so here's the deal. Totally screwed this up. This was actually, well, I'm not going to tell you what it's for. It's not to throw at Cujo. So do not, I've already gotten that from the back. Do not throw this at Cujo. So we had this cool little thing planned where it's like, hey, with life, what happens when life gives you lemons? You do what? You make lemonade. So yeah, with vodka. Yes, you make lemonade with vodka. That's an interesting. So when life gives you lemons, what do you do, Bob? Lemonade and vodka. Okay, now I think there is a horrible theme going on here, but it is Friday. So the point of this is when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. It was supposed to be this positive message, and I totally forgot to give it. So anyway, think of a very positive message. Think of a time when life has given you lemons and start making lemonade with vodka. All right, let's get back to Cujo.
I like it. I like the ethic. I like the lemonade with vodka. Good. How are we doing so far, friends? Has this been a useful exploration? Okay, that makes me happy. Now let's drive some value. What I want to do is I want to reach back into my life again as an instructor at your fighter weapons school. I want to talk about how it is that we apply concepts to build teams that really engage, that get buy-in, that drive results, that constantly improve, that are excited about coming to work every day because they see the results of their activities and they're happy with those activities. And we just went through an exploration of a little birthday party planning session. We just went through and analyzed how effective was this debrief, this pre-debrief that the team put itself through here on the heels of their planning. Now let's talk about that. And for those of you that buy into my notion that we ought to take 30 minutes this afternoon or tomorrow morning to think on today, here's now a whole bunch of stuff for us to think on. First point, first principle that I would offer to you from the perspective of a former and still thinks of himself as a fighter pilot, it's this. In order to have meaningful, effective accountability, we always have to lead into the conversation with a performance yardstick against which we measure ourselves. And I want us all to take note of performance yardstick, document that. It helps reinforce the concept in our minds. And it also gives us something to reflect on as we go back and we think on today. Performance yardstick. It's going to enable effectiveness and efficiency, driving meaningful results. Now take that and put that on a back burner for just a second. This morning, we've defined two terms so far. We've defined accountability. We said that it's taking absolute ownership for the outcomes that the team has achieved. We've also defined what a debrief is. We said that a debrief is the constructive evaluation of the quality of the decisions we're making in relationship to our objectives. Now it's time for a third definition. And I would ask you, because we don't have all robotic teams, to share with me, how do you define what a team is? What's a team? What's a team? A group of people. Hopefully they have a common goal, he says. Thank you for that. I like that. It's a simple and yet profound explanation for what it is that we're now about to talk about and explore. Remember, I told you that when I wrote Debrief to Win, my intent was to reverse engineer a fighter squadron so that we could all learn what it is that enables that group to consistently do well in a disruptive environment. In order to write my book, I had to buy a bunch of books. My wife was getting very angry at me for the volume of books that I was buying, but I had to do research. She said, "Why can't you go to the library?" I said, "Because I need these things for the rest of my life." She's like, "Great, now we got more junk to haul around." One of the books that we're hauling around because we're 3 weeks away from moving again is a book called The Wisdom of Teams, written by two researchers, John Katzenbach and Doug Smith. Who are they? They are two guys who are fascinated by teams and spent 2 decades of their lives studying teams to unpack what it is that makes a team work. And I loved the definition that they offered. It builds on yours, sir. Here's what they say. A team is a small group of people. They say it's capped at 25 so that individual voices can be heard. You have too many people in a team, it's hard for everybody to be heard. They say that it's people with complementary skills. We bring people with multiple skills into the team setting so that we can do better. But now we get into the real meat of what a team is. Katzenbach and Smith say it's a group of people that share commitment to a common purpose, to performance goals, to an approach that they've crafted for which they hold themselves accountable. They say it's 6 components that makes a team. And if we think about it, you're trying to bring a disparate group of people together and trying to get them all to row in the same direction. You got to work at that. It doesn't just happen. And we've seen that. Maybe we still have struggles with this day in and day out. Now, if we're struggling with this concept, note this. In their 2 decades of research, where they spent most of their time studying business teams, Katzenbach and Smith say that most of the business teams that they studied were missing 1 or more of the components that we see on the board over here, which had an impact on the team's performance. And that probably makes sense. If we don't share commitment to a common purpose, if we don't know what the goals are, if we don't hold ourselves accountable, how are we going to be our best? So it makes sense that there'd be some performance issues. Now, I'll tell you, I think this is a great starting point. But I'll also tell you that starting at age 17 at your United States Air Force Academy, I learned that there's a couple of additional components that really make a team click. The first is we have to learn to subordinate our self-interests to the good of the team. At the Air Force Academy, the standard of performance shifted from what I was used to growing up. And I went to 3 different high schools, courtesy of my dad being in the Air Force. The last one was Rockhurst High School up the road in Kansas City. In order to get accepted to the Air Force Academy, I had to have a pretty good resume to compete against all of those who wanted to join at the time that I did. And that resume was driven by individual performance, grades, how many extracurricular activities I was doing, what different things I did in those extracurricular activities to have different titles and whatnot. It was all about me, and that was comfortable. At the Air Force Academy, the upperclassmen who trained me said, it's no longer about you. What do I mean by that? One of our standards was wearing our uniform correctly. And every day we were assessed for how proper we were wearing our uniforms, how the belt buckle was shined, the shoes, how the shirt lined up with the pants, all kinds of little goofy things that have tremendous meaning later on in life. If I came out looking sharp and my roommate came out looking like a slob, guess what? I failed. The standard was not whether I was meeting expectations, it was whether the team was. What a beautiful evolution for a young 17-year-old. Here's the second principle, second addition to what it is that makes up a team. And I take you back to my time at Eglin Air Force Base, where my teammates spent 6 months determining whether or not I was willing to buy into and live the values and belief systems of the team. I learned that lesson before I went to the Air Force Academy. I learned that working at a small restaurant, a chain that you might be familiar with. They had an outlet at the Chesterfield Mall in Chesterfield, Missouri. It's called Chick-fil-A. They're really committed to their values and to their beliefs, so much that it drives behaviors. Chick-fil-A's corporate purpose is to glorify God in all that we do and to make a meaningful impact on the lives of the people we touch. It's not about selling chicken. It's because people are wedded to that purpose that they behave a certain way. When you thank somebody at Chick-fil-A, what do they say? And we didn't plant that answer. It happens everywhere. It's my pleasure. And what's the age group? What's the demographic of people that are saying it's my pleasure, who are keeping those places spotless and serving us outstanding chicken? A lot of times it's teenagers who come from the same society that we're mining to hire into our businesses to accomplish our mission. There's something to it. If you have issue with these last 2 components, subordination of self and alignment of values and beliefs, go study Chick-fil-A for a roadmap to performance success. And we'll just stop there for this. Those are the 8 components of what a team is, and those are things that we might go back and reflect on and ask ourselves this afternoon or tomorrow morning, is my team truly a team? Now let's talk about how high-performance teams organize to win, how any real team organizes to do the work that they do. They follow a team life cycle. And the team life cycle usually looks about like this. First of all, there's an expectation of accountability that's built into it. On our life cycle, it's right over here. It's an expectation that there's going to be a debrief. An expectation that we're going to be held to account for the decisions we're making. Guess what? Knowing we're going to be held to account drives performance. The opposite is also true. Knowing that we're not going to be held to account, knowing that there's not going to be an accountability period means I can get away with not bringing my best, which is what my wife was lamenting as an executive leader in a company that needed her, but one that she ultimately quit. Lou Holtz gives a keynote where he asks us to assess before we make a decision, can we live with the potential outcomes of this decision? It helps drive better decisions. This is the same thing. Good. The next component of what we're talking about here in what we call the debrief focused approach, planning. Let me tell you a couple things about planning. Two things we've learned in the military over the centuries about planning. Number one, every plan is outdated the moment that we stop planning. Number two, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So why do we do it? Why would we waste time if it's going to be outdated and it's not going to survive first contact, going through the rigor of planning? What do you think? Say again? Get to the second fight? Okay, so it's going to help us to understand the battle space. It's going to help us to understand what it is that we're going to get into. It's going to help us to start to prepare ourselves to deal with adapting in real time to the reality of the world in which we live. The more time we spend analyzing, the better equipped we are to make a decision faster in the heat of the moment. Now, let me tell you something about planning. And in the last 4 years, I've been asking people, what kind of baggage do I bring in as a retired military guy talking about teamwork to business leaders? And when we get past the niceties of, well, you're a good guy, I appreciate your service, and all, we get things like, well, you come from a background that was very black and white. We come from a background, Cujo, where when the leader came in and said, this is what we're going to do, everybody says, yes, ma'am, and they do it. You come from a background where if somebody doesn't agree with you, you can prosecute them and punish them. Thank you, Hollywood. That's not how it is in my unit. Let me tell you what I was taught as a young lieutenant and captain. When it comes to mission planning, it's my responsibility, my duty to speak up and to challenge and to question. If the plan doesn't look good, it's my responsibility to say, with all due respect, I don't think this is the right thing for us to do. What we want in our planning session is creative friction. What we want is as many people with different perspectives to come together, to come in here, to use their complementary skills to our mutual advantage and to say, hey, as much as this previous solution has worked to solve problems in the past, I think the battle space has changed. I think the bad guys are worse. I think we ought to take a different approach. And to me, when I see young warriors step up and say, with all due respect, sir, I recommend we go this way, I go, yes, we're doing it right. Planning equals creative friction. Planning equals people speaking up and providing their perspective. Planning is a very important process. And what we do in planning, two additional things that come out of planning, we learn what the tripwire is going to be to take us into contingency land, and we also evaluate our plans from the perspective of our enemies. We call that red teaming. We ask ourselves, how would we defeat ourselves if we were the bad guys and watching us execute this plan to figure out how to build a better plan? That's planning in a nutshell. And in an ideal world, everybody on the team would be part of the plan. I would probably recognize we don't live in an ideal world, right? How do we compensate for that? We learn in a fighter squadron to tell the story of what we intend to do by way of our plan as part of our pre-mission briefing. Before we ever go out and launch, we tell the story of what we intend to do, and we do so relatively effectively. Maybe it looks about like this. I'll pick on you again, Vicki, but now in a really positive way. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is our whole company. We're here today, and we're fired up about the opportunity that we have before us tomorrow. Vicki, you're our point person for this. We've got our newest prospective customer coming here to this beautiful facility. They're going to be on site Saturday morning from 8 until 9 a.m. They're coming in from the West Coast. They've got to leave here at 9 o'clock to get to Springfield, to get back to San Francisco. Time is tight, which means you've really got to be on point tomorrow. I'd ask you to be here at 7:30 tomorrow, just so we got everything squared away. We're going to be in this room. We're not going to change a thing. My computer's going to stay plugged in. We've got sound and everything all set up for you. All that you need to do is be at the front door to welcome these 4 people who are representing our newest client. bring them in here, and then you're going to give them our why briefing, like you've done so well for the last 5 years. And in that why briefing, 30 minutes of why it is that we've chosen to do the work that we do to impact the community the way that we do, and you're going to tell it the way that you do it so well, because we know what impact that's going to make on their hearts. And then that's also, if you're regimented on the 30 minutes, going to give us a time for those people to meet individual members of our beautiful company over here so that they can talk about how they're contributing to our why, because we know how important that is as well. So that at 9 o'clock, when you're escorting them out the front door, we've got our newest customer walking out the front door. Vicki, are you ready to rock and roll tomorrow from 8 to 9? She's fired up. And this is a totally fictional scenario. If we've done the mission briefing well, she actually is so fired up that tonight she's going to practice that briefing multiple times. She's going to come in here at 7 o'clock tomorrow, maybe even earlier. She's going to be on point. She's going to deliver as expected. It's going to be beautiful. That's the power of a mission briefing. We might want to start to use that to inspire our teammates and also to highlight to the rest of the team how important they are to mission success. We all understand how vitally important Vicki is as a result of that mission briefing. Would you agree? There's another benefit of pre-mission briefings. Let's just say it's now tomorrow morning. It's 7:52 tomorrow morning. Vicki's not here. We finally get the text message that Vicki is in the ER. She's having an emergency appendectomy right now. What do? Loretta steps up. She's an old friend. Met her a couple years ago. She steps up and she says, I've got this thing. Cujo, can you just make sure that this thing is loaded up? Can somebody make sure that they meet these prospective customers at the front door so that I can get my mind together? I've got 7 minutes now to get everything squared away. Loretta steps in and delivers on point. She knows 30 minutes on why. She knows 30 minutes where the team is going to sit down and they're going to think about and meet us and understand how we're contributing. She's the one that enables mission success. Why? Well, that's an interesting question. It's a question that we need to unfold and unpack. But really what we're understanding here is that execution is about adapting the theory or the vision of what it is we planned to the reality of the world in which we're in. And it never goes according to plan. Now, what I've noticed working in businesses of all shapes and sizes for the last several years is that on the heels of a victory, we almost never debrief. The expectation is we're going to win. So why would we spend any time unpacking why we did? Oh, such a missed opportunity. Because we're changing that paradigm today, we know that on the heels of this victory, as soon as those 4 people leave, before any of us go home to spend our weekend with our families, we're going to sit down, we're going to debrief this thing. It needs to happen immediately. And here's what we're going to analyze. If the objective was to convert the client, and we did, why did we? And in answering the question why, we got to get into Loretta's world for just a little bit to understand how was it that you weren't even the person that we picked to lead this thing, and yet you came in here and delivered what it was that we expected our other teammate to do? What enabled that? And what she may come back and say is, well, Cujo, for the last 5 years, I've been listening to Vicki deliver the most powerful why briefing, and it's made such an impact in my life that I've routinely repeated it to myself driving home. It reminds me on the days when I'm frustrated why it is I'm going to give my all. And so when she wasn't here, it was easy to fill those shoes because she made it possible. Now, think about this. Vicki's in the ER. She's dealing with a surgery that she didn't expect to have happen. How neat would it be for her to find out from our team that she enabled our mission success today by virtue of the example that she's been delivering for the last 5 years? How does that help with her resilience, her ability to bounce back? Plus, she gets to know that the team loves her and cares about her, because part of our debrief is how is it that we're going to support her while she's still going through this frustrating time. So those are 2 really good outcomes. But now let's talk about the deficiency that this debrief ought to be highlighting. What did we get wrong going into execution of this plan? No plan B. And if we don't debrief this success, we might make the same mistake again. What was that mistake? We put all the eggs in the Vicki's going to stay healthy basket, right? She was the single point of failure. And unfortunately, today in the battle space, the enemy won, right? Took her out, medical issue. We're lucky that Loretta was able to fill in the gap, but we cannot plan on luck always solving our problems. And so the outcome from this debrief on the performance side of the stage says, how about next time we do one of these things? We have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary briefer who's going to be equally prepared to step in. That's a great evolution. We've created a new standard now. If we don't debrief this victory, we might miss that. In fact, oftentimes we do. Now you'll note that this process, plan, brief, execute, debrief, it's a circular process, means it's an infinite loop. We never stop doing it. Why? Because we expect to lose critical members of the team. We expect to onboard new members of the team fresh out of training. And we realize the faster we can get those new members through this, the faster they're going to understand how to win in our domain. The more times we debrief, the faster we get better. The more we re-emphasize the good that's taking place around here, and we fire up and energize our teammates. It's an infinite loop, which means you got to pick where you enter this thing from. And I would tell you that a fantastic entry point into the loop is understanding what our purpose and goals are. And so right now, we're going to go back into simulation land, but now all of us are going to jump into simulation land for a second. I'm breaking out the mighty iPhone stopwatch again. Our team leader is already starting to have heart palpitations, but right now I want everybody in this building to think as if you had stepped forward and been part of the Jimmy's birthday party planning team. And right now we're going to take 30 seconds, everybody here, we're going to write down what we believe our team's purpose was this morning. 30 seconds. What was our team's purpose? Your time starts now. Good. If you're still writing, that's okay. Let's talk a little bit about how the military has equipped our team members to go out there and win. And when I hear that somebody with my background comes from such a rigid organizational structure, so inflexible, so unadaptive, it saddens me a little bit inside, because it says to me that maybe we don't trust that our military is organized well enough to deal with a very fast-moving battle space. So let's go back and let's talk a little bit about the history of organizational design in militaries writ large, and specifically in our military. But in order to do that, we've got to go backwards in time to the late 1700s. We've got to go back and we've got to study the Prussian army. We've got to go study an army that was so disciplined, so regimented, so bureaucratic, so hierarchical, so command and control structured, that they lost back-to-back wars, and they were very frustrated by that. They lost to a guy who was very adaptive on the battle space. His name was Napoleon. And the Prussian military went back to study, why is it, with as good as we are, and as much as we've organized, like the best armies of our time have done, that we're losing? And what they found was they were too rigid, they were too bureaucratic, they were too hierarchical, and this command and control structure that they had was exactly wrong for the battle space that they were on. And so the Prussian General Staff created a concept that they called Auftragstaktik, which is poorly and loosely translated into our language as mission command. Formally adopted by the United States Army, I might add. What is mission command? It says that the decision makers need to be the folks that are on the front lines of the battle. Those are your sergeants, those are your lieutenants. They need to be the ones that see the battle space unfolding in front of their eyes, not the people that are miles and miles and miles distant from where things are taking place. They need to understand how to make those decisions well, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that we're going to rely on to help us to win. And Auftragstaktik said that it's the command staff's job to resupply a victorious army. It's the headquarters' job to help a defeated army to bounce back as fast as possible. That's their role. Now, Auftragstaktik was very effectively used by the German Luftwaffe at the outset of World War II when they invaded France. It was also very effectively used by the US Army as we prepared for the Allied invasion of the beaches of Normandy as we reconquered mainland Europe in World War II. Has anybody here ever seen the TV show Band of Brothers? Outstanding show. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you've watched it, go watch it again. My family's rewatching it. It's such a fantastic. I think episode 2 is where we're introduced to the C-47 Skytrains that are bringing in the paratroopers who are dropping in behind German lines prior to the main invasion force to help make the invasion successful. And if you remember back to, those of you who've seen this, if you remember back to that show, you remember that you've got airplanes being shot out of the sky. You've got people burning in those airplanes that are being shot out of the sky. You've got airplanes that are crashing into one another. You've got people that are dropping miles away from their intended drop zones. You've got people showing up in fields by themselves without their equipment because it was cut off somewhere in the fall. And they're trying to figure out, is there anybody else who's American near me? And all of a sudden, by virtue of little clicks, you have two people that have never met each other before who introduce themselves to one another and say, okay, what are we going to go do? They applied Auftragstaktik. They specifically applied the portion that enables all of this to work, commander's intent. What is it? It's where the headquarters comes in and says, hey team, here's your purpose. Here are the key tasks that need to be accomplished. Here's the end state that we're marching out to achieve. It's usually formulated in the form of a paragraph so that anybody can memorize it. Here's your purpose. Here are the key tasks. Here's the end state that we're marching out to achieve. So now we go back to the paratroopers in World War II, two people that had never met each other before, never trained together. They go, well, my name's Rob. Hey, my name's Mike. Cool. We know what our purpose is. We know what the key tasks are. We know what the end state is. We've got to support the mainland invasion tomorrow. And they go and take action right now. Such a powerful concept. And it applies in business just as much as it does anyplace else. Go look up commander's intent. You'll find a Harvard Business Review article written by a former Marine talking about how commander's intent helps us to be better business leaders in all we do. We're going to revisit commander's intent here in just a second. Now, question for you. How many of you are privileged to lead high performance teams? Show of hands. Raise them high. Good. Let's talk briefly about what is a high performance team. Let's define this. On the backdrop here, you see 5 F-22 Raptors. I use this as my explanation, or the backdrop to the explanation of what a high performance team is. Here's one thing to note. That's $154 million right there. That's how much a single Raptor costs. When you go through Raptor training, you really feel the pucker factor is high, like don't screw this thing up, Cujo. That's $770 million of hardware with 5 of these. I took 12 of these across the Pacific Ocean on my last deployment. We had 28 of these in the 7th Fighter Squadron that I commanded back in Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. I'm familiar with running really large dollar amount organizations, okay, $4 billion of assets. That was a big thing. I use this as a backdrop for Katzenbach and Smith's words. Remember those two people that wrote The Wisdom of Teams? Here's how they would characterize a high performance team. And I would emphasize to you that they're right. I would emphasize to you that in a fighter squadron, we look at the world from the lens of we have to be ready to step in and lead at any point in time during the mission, which means everybody on the team has to be able to do each other's jobs and be prepared to do so anytime during the mission. Come back to this picture. The person out front's usually the flight lead, the person who led mission planning, who led the mission briefing, who's supposed to lead the mission execution, who's going to lead the mission debrief. But guess what? Here's the nasty little secret about fighter aviation. The airplanes don't always work. $150 million guarantees that sometimes the landing gear won't raise, or the afterburner won't ignite, or the radar won't turn on, or there's going to be a hydraulic leak, or any number of other things is going to happen because these things are just so stinking sophisticated that they can break all the time. What do we do? In a fighter squadron, the ethic is the story just got better. Like, we can't call up the bad guys and say, hey, so sorry, like, we'd love to be there today, but we're having some maintenance issues. So what do you say we do this thing tomorrow? Like, that doesn't work. Instead, we instantly assume a different role. Every member of the team does, and we still go out there to win. And because we're that much more outnumbered, the story just got better. It's a great way to look at life. The final characteristic of what a high-performance team, though, is most germane to our conversation today, learning how to practice accountability better, build stronger teams. Here's what Katzenbach and Smith say. On a high-performance team, if one of us fails, we all do. And this truly defines how it is that we take ownership, how it is we practice accountability, how it is that we lead the teams that we're privileged to lead. Imagine this scenario. Imagine that we just lost our biggest client, whose CEO happens to be a personal friend of mine. And the loss happens while I'm on vacation someplace. And the loss happened because somebody made a mistake, and it was too big of a mistake for us to recover from. And here we are, and I come back, and I'm so angry about this. All I want is an outlet for my frustration and anger, and I just lay into the person who made the mistake. That happens sometimes, right? We're human after all. On the high performance team, one of the things that we learn early on as young pups is we never do that. And in fact, if we're privileged to be in a leadership position, we learn that we have to admit to our own culpability in the outcome. We actually learn to ask the question, how did I let my team down? Pick on Vicki again. Let's say that she's the one that made the mistake over here. Even though I'm angry on the inside about the outcome that we've achieved, the first question I'm going to ask is, where did I fail Vicki? Was it in onboarding? Was it the fact that I just wasn't as engaged as I have been in the past and I expected her to figure things out through osmosis? Was it the fact that we haven't had a training program in the last year and a half? COVID has been such a nightmare, and so we haven't been investing into our team the way that we used to? Was it the fact that I've been so angry for the last couple of years that she's been here that she didn't even want to reach out to me on vacation because she was afraid of my response? How did I let Vicki down? On a high performance team, the flight lead always asks, where am I culpable? I always take absolute ownership. Good. Here's something else that I learned when I was writing Debrief to Win. From Teamwork Science now, a team is a team is a team. There is nothing that's domain specific to a military team that can't cross-apply to another team. And this is a tremendous opportunity for us. Let me ask you this, over the last year and a half, which team that you're on has suffered arguably the most? And if you come back with a business answer, I'm not going to accept it. What team? Did I hear family? Oh yeah, family team. Think about it. Kids doing Zoom online learning with learning in brackets. Not being able to go and do the things that are part of the fabric of society for a long period of time, isolation. Kids not being able to interact with one another, family members not being able to do the things that you're used to. The list goes on and on. It's been a tough time. Which is to say that the opportunity of today is to not only think on the concepts we're exploring right now and applying them into the business domain, but actually further cross-applying them into the family domain. I would argue that the most important team that we ought to be focused on is the family team. And every team thrives if they practice accountability the right way. Let's take Debrief to Win home. I had a boss when I was on Headquarters U.S. European Command, 4-star general named General Philip Breedlove. He had 2 jobs. One was Commander U.S. European Command. The other job was Supreme Commander Allied Powers Europe. That's NATO. He spent 29 days out of the month working NATO and 1 day out of the month with U.S. European Command. But when he came and visited us once a month, his message was consistently the same. Someday, friends, you're going to hang up your uniform for the last time and go home. And if you're privileged to have a family, hopefully they're still there with you when that happens. Make sure that you don't hijack that. Good. That's the instructional piece. I think it's enough instruction for us to move forward. Now I'd like to offer some coaching. Coaching based upon my previous experience leading these kinds of teams and teaching how it is that we lead them. I want to point to our Jimmy's birthday party team right now, and specifically to our team leader who's sitting there going, oh no, not again, Cujo. I thought I was done with this. Hey, we've got a definition of what a team is. Katzenbach and Smith say it's a team that has small size, complementary skills, commitment to common purpose, to performance goals, and to an approach for which we hold ourselves accountable. By that standard, was your team a team this morning, my friend? I think so. Okay, good. For all of us, I think it's important that we take some time to assess, are our teams really teams? And now we'll build on that. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about team life cycles. Let's talk about debriefs. Let's talk about how effective the Jimmy's birthday party planning team pre-debrief was. And here's what you said. You said, and Vicki did such a nice job of writing this down, and her handwriting is legible, and she's an outstanding teammate, one of the best wingmen that I've had in a session like this. You said 4. We need to do the site visit immediately. We need to figure out food allergies, but we were 1 step shy from a 5, so that's pretty good. You said 4. We got a couple of cleanup items. We need to figure out Jimmy's age. That's going to factor in on how it is that we conclude the plan. You said a 4. It was a nice review of the flow. You said a 3. There was a question about objectives, and then you said a 5. We creatively approached this issue, and the leader checked with everybody. We got some good feedback. And then I asked our leader, how do you self-assess? And he came back and he gave himself a 3. And he said, I made some mistakes and there was some room for improvement, and actually the team did better than I did. The average score, if you sum all that up, is a 3.8 on a 5-point scale. But there is a variety of opinion. We're not 100% consistent in our response. And now I want you to take something off the back burner, something we put there at the beginning of the instructional piece. I want us to ask ourselves this question: what was our shared definition of success for this birthday party? What was the yardstick against which we were going to measure? Already we find that we have some inconsistencies. We have people bringing some subjectivity into the question. Hey, I would have liked to have seen more of this because that's how I like to plan. Somebody else says, I would have liked some more of this because that's what I think is important. Which leads to some of the variety in the answers that we've achieved. What was the yardstick against which we're going to measure? Where does that shared definition of success come from? It always comes from our understanding and our shared understanding of purpose. Purpose, team purpose, it's part of the ecosystem. We've gotta be clear here. We do these assessment reports, as I've mentioned at the beginning, when we come in and we spend time with a team. Check this one out. This answer from a company, a really solid company. If asked, each of my teammates would articulate the same shared team purpose. The average score here is a 3.57 on a 10-point scale. That's interesting, especially when you review what it is that a team is. Commitment to a common purpose and performance goals. If we don't understand what the purpose is, it makes it difficult for us to assess whether or not we're achieving it. Now, we took 30 seconds today to document what we believed our team's purpose was. What did you say? Man, what did you say? What did you write down? What was the Jimmy's birthday party planning team purpose? It's for Jimmy to have fun. Thank you. What did you say the purpose was?
He had fun, and hopefully him and the guests had fun, and hopefully remember it in a positive way.
Okay, him and the guests have fun. Remember it in a positive way. What did you say, ma'am? Okay, so now we've got a bit of process. Over here, we're talking about fun. That's fuzzy. What did you say? Okay, goal was a successful birthday party. What did you say? Memorable and fun. What did you say? You were on the team, weren't you? What did you say? Prepare for redundancies. I like that. You were the team lead. What did you say the team's purpose was?
For Jimmy to be celebrated safely around his birthday.
Okay. Here's the issue. If we don't have clarity of purpose, if we don't share a common one, it makes it very difficult for us to assess whether or not we've achieved the desired outcome. For those of you who wrote down to successfully plan a party under $300 in the next 4 days, you might come into this accountability system and say, we knocked it out of the park. This was tough, we did it, yay us. For those of you who came back in and said, well, wait a second, I was hoping that Jimmy would have some fun here. Maybe the people that we invited would also have some fun. You might come back and say, I don't know if we're set for success. And now there's a bit of friction. There's a bit of conflict over here. And instead of high-fiving each other on the way out of our accountability session, we might even be frustrated at one another. And we might even say to ourselves, that was a waste of our time. Let's never do that again. What my experience is that birthday party tends to hijack this whole discussion. So let's take it off the table. Let's say that this morning we convened an emergency planning session to do whatever it is we do here at Company X. We're basically doing a project that's serving a customer. If that's the equation, who does Jimmy represent? The customer. And if Jimmy's the customer, and if we're trying to figure out what the yardstick is against which we're going to measure success or failure, what question do we need to ask? What does Jimmy want? That's an interesting question, is it not? Did we ask that today? Friends, we've done Jimmy's birthday party for the last 4 years. We've done this at the Pentagon. We've done this at the Air Force Academy. We've done this with a surgical team focused on children's heart care. Most importantly, we've done this with a variety of businesses and business teams across North America. You want to know how many times anybody's ever asked, what does Jimmy want in 4 years? We're tracking it. The answer is 10. Only 10 times has anybody ever asked, what does Jimmy want? And here's the answer that I've given each of those times. Loretta's seen this before, she knows. Jimmy, who's turning 94 in 4 days, lost his best friend of 72 years a year ago on his birthday. That's his bride. He misses her tremendously. The only thing that he wants to do on this, the 1-year anniversary of her passing, is to go spend some time with her at the cemetery. He's not gotten over it. This is really, really hard. This is not a day of celebration, and he would ask that somebody be there with him because he knows how challenging this is going to be. That's interesting because what I remember you saying was that we had an average score of a 3.8 on a 5-point scale with 4 4s and 1 5. How effective were we in this pre-debrief? Measured against the standard of what Jimmy wants, how did we do today? Somebody said 0. Okay, all right, good. Here's a principle. The yardstick that's going to help us to have an effective, meaningful accountability session is set at the beginning of our planning session. If we don't start there, how are we going to plan for effect? I promise you this, make that one micro adjustment, walk away with huge ROI starting today. Now here's my next question. Is this a new concept? Is this the first time that we're understanding we ought to ask the customer, what does the customer want? No. Okay, so we understand that we already know this. So then why did we violate the principle today? Like most groups do, by the way. Why we do it? Why we do it, team lead? I'll be happy to answer that question. Here's why we violated the principle. Think about the disruption. Hey, 4 people, come forward. Volunteer to take part in something that you don't even know what you're volunteering to take part of. Hey, I give you a bunch of facts. I give you a bunch of silos. Hey, you're responsible for this. You're responsible for this. You're responsible for this. I throw in some psychological shaping, right? 50-50 boy, girl. What do we assume there? It's a kid, yeah? And then we add the pressure cooker, the component of time. 4 minutes. We increase the frequency with which I give you the timing updates the closer we get to the end. How does that feel? The pressure is on, and in the midst of pressure, here's what ends up happening. Almost every single time, we go to the most comfortable place on the planet. That's task work land. You want to feel like you're doing something, go come up with a list of things to do. Put little check marks next to the left thing, and then fill those check marks in and say, see, boss, look what I've done. And it's so satisfying. Right up until the point where you realize you did the wrong thing. If you've ever read a little book by Stephen Covey called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you might recall that the second habit is begin with the end in mind. If we don't, even though we work ourselves to the bone, we walk away saying, oh man. Friends, task work is not teamwork. If you want to build a real team, you got to focus on building teamwork. And teamwork, according to Katzenbach and Smith, is a consequence of us understanding our common purpose, our performance goals, and the approach for which we hold ourselves accountable. It's a full contact sport. It says we don't take things at face value, we're going to dig. What we did today is what we are so naturally inclined to do. We made a bunch of assumptions and we took action on them. I promise you this, we're not going to make that mistake ever again. Not this crowd, not this audience. That's 100% guaranteed. And the way that we move forward is for every job that we do, if we're in a leadership position, we're going to deliver commander's intent. We're going to say, this is your purpose. These are your key tasks. This is the end state that we want you to achieve. That's going to give the clarity of expectations that our teammates need so that they can execute. And if we're on the receiving end of a task and somebody says, hey, go do this, we're going to say, okay, that sounds great. Help me understand this. What is this? What's the purpose behind this? What are the key tasks that you envision me accomplishing? What's the end state that we're trying to march out to achieve? Then and only then can we enter into the team life cycle with confidence that we can plan well and we can practice accountability well. Now we're onto something. And if we're onto something, and if we're armed with this notion of commander's intent, now we get, I'd say, 99% of the time, buy-in and performance. The day is all about teams. It's about getting our teams to perform better, give them commander's intent, and ritualize accountability. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, I think if we can take action on this, we now go back and take a look at the challenges, and we wipe this one off the board. Clarity of expectations, that's on us. We're never going to fall victim to this trap again. As leaders, we're never going to allow our teammates to fall victim to this trap again. The rest of this is also on us. The frequency with which we practice debrief, that's on us. And today, we took action to improve how it is we practice accountability. Everybody can raise their hand saying that they learned from the Air Force's subject matter expert on how to debrief, how to do it well. Bingo. We're driving ROI, period, dot. Comments, questions, BS flags, they're always open. In Fighter Squadron, we're always throwing BS flags. What's on your minds? And I'll turn to our team leader first. What comments, questions, feedback do you have about this exercise?
Well, actually, I went through a program a couple of months ago about this, where a general contractor for the Department of Defense sits down and has them write down 7 words on how they would define the project. If they do this historically. And that's just exactly what I mean. It's a Jimmy deal, right? But it's about being able to remember and regularly repeat those activities.
Amen. You know what I'd say? We were one question away from victory today. Talk about framing that one. You know what? One question you're never going to be absent from this point on. What does Jimmy want? Let me tell you one other thing about this whole little exercise. What a simple, little, complex, deep, profound exercise Jimmy's birthday party is, by the way. The Jimmy that I care about for you all is not your customer. You've already got that part figured out. The Jimmy that I'm advocating for today is your teammate, the one who you're leading. The next time that you go into a meeting, I would propose that you ask yourself, do we understand what success looks like going into this meeting? Do we know how to measure whether or not we've achieved it? Is this meeting, do we have a plan for it? Do we have an objective associated with it, going to be value added? What many of you are going to find is that your meetings don't pass that level of scrutiny, and so therefore you're going to erase meaningless meetings from the equation. That's going to buy you some time. And for those who say we don't have enough time to practice accountability, now we've got it. Here's another question for you. How many people here, please show of hands, started out the day by defining what success looks like for you today? That's pretty consistent. If we don't start the day by asking ourselves, what does success look like today? What are our objectives for the day? What's the plan to achieve it? How do we know whether we've had a successful day? If you go study the diary of Anne Frank, that young woman in an attic in a bad time wrote an observation one day where she said, wouldn't it be neat if at the end of every day, every man and every woman would go back and assess the day, both the good and the bad of the day, so that they could learn from that and make a better day tomorrow? One of the things that my wife, Diane, has asked us to do as a family is to debrief regularly. She's an accountant by trade. I met her halfway through my military career. She's not an Air Force person. She's a late entry into that life. When she read Debrief to Win, her question was, why don't we do this at home? What it looks like for us at the beginning of the day with our kiddos is, hey, what does success look like for you today, Michael, Christopher, Lucy? They answer that question. I then ask, what are your objectives for today, Michael, Christopher, and Lucy? The youngest two, they get a pass. What are your plans to achieve your objectives, I next ask. They craft those, I might give them a couple of inputs, coaching. At the end of the day, before we do our family prayers, did you achieve success today, yes or no? If yes, why? If no, why not? You know what's really remarkable? Listening to a 15-year-old self-debrief, Dad, I didn't hit my mark for success, didn't meet my objectives. The root cause is I got sidetracked by Xbox. Here's my fix. Tomorrow, no Xbox. I'm going to do the stuff that I meant to have done today and get caught up tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a win. And Dad doesn't have to say a thing. That's pretty neat. Diane says we need to debrief more frequently. Good. That's part one. This is a dangerous inflection point. We could take a brief break. Maybe we ought to. But if we do so, it's 5 minutes maximum. Do we take the break or do we push through? Push through, they say. Okay, I like it. Because what I want to talk about right now is understanding more of this ecosystem. I specifically want to introduce you all to concepts that routinely people tell me that they're not familiar with. Show of hands, how many people here are familiar with the concept of psychological safety? Okay, this is a huge opportunity for us. Today we're going to talk about it. We're going to get a brief introduction into psychological safety. We're going to talk a little bit more about rituals. We're also going to talk about the importance of behaviors to drive accountability the right way. And so we'll start off with this question. I want a show of hands. Here's the question. What do you prefer, winning or losing? Who's here for losing? Who here prefers winning? Okay, good. Go Team America. Here's the next question. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer sticking with the status quo, or do you prefer being the person who leads the failed change effort? Status quo, raise your hands. Failed change effort, raise your hands. That's interesting. And now I'm confused. First question, you said you wanted to win. Second question, you said you wanted to lead the failed change effort. One might categorize that as a loss. Why do you want to be associated with leading the failed change effort? Help me understand, please. So you can win, she says. Thank you, ma'am. Somehow, she has evolved to understand and value the benefits of failure. It seems to me that this is the kind of a crowd where that's the prevailing ethic. Now, here's a follow-on question. Do your teammates feel the same way? If given the option, would your teammates prefer sticking with the status quo or being associated with the failed effort to change? Which side? Status quo. By the way, I've asked these questions enough time to know in advance what you're going to say. It's the same dynamic every time. You're here because of who you are. You're here because you're leaders. You're here because you've failed enough times to see the value of it. And you lead teams where people don't see the world through the same lens. And in fact, people that we're privileged to lead are trapped in an environment of fear. Oh, the batteries are starting to die right now. Fear. What are they in fear of? Why did you say that your teammates would stick with the status quo? It's comfortable, and there's implication, there's risk leading the failed change effort. You push back against the status quo, you're trying to do something different, it doesn't work out. Maybe that highlights you negatively, which means maybe you're going to be fired. Maybe you're not going to get that performance bonus. Maybe you're not going to be the person selected to be the next leader, and the list goes on and on and on. And so because of fear and the consequences thereof, we just stick with what's been comfortable to this point. Now, let's talk about the world in which we grow up. And we're going to go into another book that I used in preparation to write Debrief to Win. This from Dr. Amy Edmondson. Who's she? Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management at Harvard Business School. Why her? She spent her entire career doing rigorous research to understand teams and what makes them click. And in her book, The Fearless Organization, she says that we, as a culture, learn early in our evolution in school to shut up. The consequences of asking questions are sometimes too grave for us. We don't want to be seen as the ignoramus. The consequences of being the disruptor are, uh-oh, you're that kind of person. And really, admitting to mistakes or weaknesses in front of our peers means we might be incompetent. Who wants that? If we aren't speaking up, we're self-censoring. And self-censoring, when you talk about team life cycle and the dynamics of what it is that we're looking for in a team, is the exact opposite of what we need to be our best. Think about planning. What did I say we're looking for in a military team when it comes to planning? Creative friction. We want people pushing back and saying, with all due respect, ma'am, I don't think this is our best play. We want diversity of thought. We don't get diversity of thought. We don't get friction if people are self-censoring. How about in the debrief? You think we're going to have a meaningful debrief if everybody just sits there silently and goes, yeah, I'm sure it all went well? No. So now let's talk about the ramifications. Let's actually go back in time. Let's talk about what it means to self-censor in a high reliability setting. Let's look at, if you're into Malcolm Gladwell, a tipping point in commercial aviation. Let's go back to December of 1978 and study United Flight 173. If you're not familiar, here are the key facts. Flight originates out of Denver, it's going into Portland. You got 189 souls on board. It's a nighttime mission. And you've got the A team in the cockpit. You have the #3 most experienced pilot in all of United, Captain Melbourne McBroom. He's at the controls that night. They make it safely to Portland. They're given clearance to land. They lower the landing gear handle. They have an unsafe gear indication. And so they make the decision. McBroom is worried that the airplane's going to spin violently out of control if they try to land in this configuration. So they go into a holding pattern for an hour to troubleshoot the gear issue. After about an hour in holding, they make the decision to go in and land. They're given clearance to land again. They're on final, and then McBroom is told to turn the airplane left. And so he does. He turns away from the runway. Shortly thereafter, the engines quit, and they come down in a residential area just outside of the Portland International Airport. 3 miracles happen simultaneously that night. First miracle, nobody on the ground is killed or injured. It's nighttime in a residential area. Nobody on the ground is killed or injured. That's a huge plus. Second miracle, it's Portland. House is built out of wood, densely packed with trees. There's no fire. The damage is limited to the impact damage alone. Wonderful. Third miracle, airplane fell out of the sky. Only 10 people died that night. If you look up this particular disaster, you're going to come across an ABC News report with Ken Kashiwahara reporting. They've got microphones in the faces of survivors that are walking off the wreckage. And people are saying, this is a miracle, and the flight crew prepared us for this. We knew what was coming, and we were ready for it, and we lived through it. And McBroom and the team were hailed as heroes that night. And then 6 months later, the situation reversed itself. National Transportation and Safety Board releases their investigation findings, and here's what they found. They found that the flight crew was negligent. They said it was an absence of teamwork that led to the disaster, and specifically nobody being responsible for monitoring the fuel state that caused the flight crew to run the airplane out of gas. McBroom lost his pilot's license, and it wrecked him as a man. Let me ask you, are there any pilots in the room today? Show of hands. We've got one. He used to fly F-15s. Let me ask you this. What's one thing that we learn early on in our evolution as aviators about gas in airplanes? And we also learn that we're in a fuel limited situation from the moment that we crank up our engines, always. Like there's typically not an airborne Texaco waiting to come refuel us, right? Is that fair? Does it pass muster that the flight crew at the end of a full mission at an hour in holding would be unaware of their gas state? No. I went back and took a look at the cockpit voice recordings. And here's what I found. Upon further analysis, they were talking about the fuel state constantly. But here's the rub. The one question that McBroom couldn't answer effectively is, why did you turn the airplane left? And why didn't you say, we cannot do this and we have to land right now? He had no answer for that. Tied to that, you will find no cockpit voice recording of anybody in the cockpit that night saying, boss, we can't do this. Both the co-pilot and the first officer, or the flight engineer rather, were silent. And one of them died that night because of the silence. What's the real issue here? In the cockpit of the 1970s, it was a culture of fear. In the cockpit of the 1970s, the captain was one step shy of a deity. In the cockpit of the 1970s, you never questioned the captain. And it cost everybody that night. And McBroom was just as much of a victim as anybody else in that flight crew. In fact, arguably more so because he bore the responsibility of the lives that were lost for the rest of his life, and his life was very difficult from that point on. Fear. The reason why this is a tipping point and why I confidently fly commercially multiple times a week, every week now, is that on the heels of this disaster, NASA gets involved to study how can we build a high-performance team that can help us to explore the cosmos, and as a secondary benefit, increase the reliability in the commercial aviation sector. And what they created was a concept called crew or cockpit resource management, a different version of CRM than what we're used to. And one of the things that CRM does for us is it gives a voice to those who previously didn't have one. And another thing that CRM does for us is it de-elevates the status of the mission lead or the person who's in charge and says you're an equal with the rest of your team. From a standpoint of mission performance, you're an equal with the rest of your team. It became the standard in commercial aviation. It became the standard in military aviation. I flew high-performance single-seat fighters for my entire career. I had to take a CRM class every year to stay current. It's also made its way into the healthcare space. If you go in for surgery next Monday on your left shoulder with the best surgical team on the planet and they start to do operation on your right shoulder, the nurse who was just hired this weekend is empowered to call a timeout, which leads to a huddle where the team is going to sit there and talk about the fact, wasn't it supposed to be the left shoulder? They're like, oh, wait a second, you're right. And while you're under anesthesia, they correct the situation before something bad happens. The takeaway for all of us is that on the heels of United Flight 173, we learned to eradicate fear from a high reliability operation. Now, how does that apply to us? How do we get our teammates to stop living in fear, to be able to push the performance envelope and get us to where it is that we want our organizations to be? In order to get there, we've got to learn to do this nasty thing, which is to embrace failure, which is what you all told me that you're comfortable doing. That's a tough one. That's a very, very tough one. So now we have to dig into what is failure and what are the good parts of failure. We go back to Amy Edmondson. She wrote a really cool Harvard Business Review article where she introduces the world to the spectrum of failure. And in it, she's outlined all kinds of different versions of failure, most of which are hugely positive. Today, we're just going to talk about the two ends of her spectrum. Praise and blame. Some failures are praiseworthy, some failures are blameworthy. Let's talk about a praiseworthy failure. I asked you earlier, did anybody here have to make a pivot to how you do what you do, or maybe even to what you do as a result of this nasty global pandemic? Show of hands. How many people here got the pivot right the first time? How many people are still in the midst of a pivot? Friends, it's praiseworthy that we didn't give up, shut down, close the doors, call it done, after the pandemic forced our hand and caused us to have to learn through failure how to win. It's praiseworthy. It's how we built the light bulb, airplane, any major innovation. It's by learning to pick ourselves up in the midst of those failures to get to where it is we aim to go. Praiseworthy. That's good. How about the opposite side of the spectrum? Let's talk blameworthy for just a second. I'm going to pick on you, Steve, only because you're sitting right over here. It's convenient, okay? Let's say that you have a company where you have a truck, okay? Doing your business, you're required. You hire me to drive your truck. Okay, next Friday I come to you and I'm like, hey boss, how you doing? Good, I'm glad to hear that, yeah? Family doing okay? Awesome, great. Hey, listen, I crashed the truck. We got any more trucks? Good, that's a win. I'll see you next Monday. What do you want to know? How did we crash the truck? It's a valid question. Well, nobody was hurt. I'm good. I'm good. We got insurance. How appropriate. Good. Well, so how did this thing happen? Well, I was texting Vicky. I was texting Vicky while I was driving. So that was the thing. But you said we got more trucks, so I'll be back Monday. Okay? Have a good weekend. Oh yeah, I just wanted to talk about that list that she did for us. That was a really cool, I mean, she didn't even know that she was going to be helping me today, so I just wanted to thank her. Oh, I'm sure there was. Now, let's pause right now. Is this a blameworthy event? Who's to blame? Me, right? That's fair. There's a law about this, isn't there? Okay, good. Now let's reset the scenario. It's a different day. I come to you, hey boss, how you doing, man? Cool, great. Family doing okay? Glad to hear it. Hey, listen, I crashed the truck. You got any more trucks? Good. See you Monday. What do you want to know? How did we crash the truck? Well, I think I took a micro nap. Like, I don't remember what happened right before impact. I think I may have fallen asleep there for just a second. That's my best guess.
Have you been to see a medical professional about that?
Oh, no. We know why I took a micro nap if I did. You want to know why? Yeah, because I've been doing those double shifts for the last 21 days. I'm the only driver that you've got. I'm exhausted, man. I'm exhausted. Now let's pause right here. Blameworthy? Yes, who's to blame? Accountability, taking absolute ownership for the outcomes that we achieve. Accountability is one of those nasty things that goes up the chain of command, not necessarily down. When we find ourselves in a situation where somebody goes and crashes a truck because they've been scheduled double shifts every day for the last 21 days and they're exhausted, yeah, I'll buy the fact that Cujo needs to be highlighting this. Cujo needs to be saying, hey, I've got to put a stop to this. But at the same time, there's something noble about the fact that I'm still trying to get the job done, like I'm giving of myself over here. And at the end of the day, the process allowed me to be out there still driving. Who owns the process here? You do. Company does, right? CEO does. Accountability gets a little bit fuzzy now. Blame gets fuzzy. Who to blame? The point of all of this, though, is that on either side of this equation, there's so much good that comes from unearthing why we failed so that we can never fail again, or how it is we're going to make meaningful progress towards achieving a more perfect version of how it is we do business. And that's what Edmondson's talking about, and that's what you all said naturally. And then we start to look at how it is that we innovate. We don't get it right the first time. We try, we analyze, we go back and try again until we finally arrive where we want to be. Oh, by the way, learning comes from failure. None of us hopped out of the womb and immediately started dancing a jig. Like we fell, it was cute, it used to be cool, we picked ourselves back up and we made it happen. Somewhere along the line that became a little bit less cool. But the point is we have to fail to learn. And the final piece of, if you read any Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, you build trust by learning how to deal with failure better, not how to deal with success better. Sometimes I've had CEOs tell me, Cujo, one of the things that you benefited from in the military was you had a foxhole mentality. You were going downrange into harm's way. It drove cohesion and trust. I said, not always. We have to work at that. But I agree with you, there is benefit to being in harm's way. Guess what we've just benefited from over the last 18 months? COVID. It's put us on a wartime footing, every single one of us. Every day has become a mission for us. Hopefully our teams are stronger because of what it is we've been able to do over the last 18 months. And if not, guess what? It's not gone yet. There's still an opportunity to seize this. The point is we build trust by learning how to properly deal with the disruptions that we face. That's one of the big upsides of having disruption. Which then gets into Jimmy's birthday party. Gosh darn it, don't go too fast over here. Our approach, what did I set you up for today? Failure. Why did I set you up for failure today? To prove a point, but really to learn. And you got this thing exactly right. You know what? If you give me 3 hours with you, I'm going to make sure that you experience a micro failure. I'm going to make sure you do so in a simulation environment where nobody gets hurt. Why? We're going to learn much more from that. If you had asked me the question, what does Jimmy want? It makes all of this learning tougher to distribute. I've had people that participated in the Jimmy's birthday party exercise who initially in the debrief say this whole thing is stupid. This whole exercise was set up to fail. It's stupid. After they understand why we do it, I had a guy say, we long ago forgot who Jimmy was. We've been selling through our dysfunction. We've got to fix it because when the market's not right any longer, we're going to fail. Had a CEO who bought "What Does Jimmy Want" t-shirts for every member of his team. And I'll tell you that this approach that we use today is one that I learned, and so did he, back in pilot training. What we learned was if we can experience these mini failures while we're on terra firma, when we're out there flying around, we're probably going to get it right. What does it look like? In pilot training, any day of pilot training, we get together as a class. Before we ever go out and fly, our flight commander, the person who's kind of our leader for the course, talks about things, upcoming birthdays, weather, what the airfield status is, and then he says, here's the situation of the day. You're upside down in a loop. You've got 125 knots indicated airspeed on. You've got a master caution light, that's bad, and a right engine fire light, that's really bad. Lieutenant Teschner, you have the aircraft, and you've got to stand up in front of everybody, all of your peers, and solve this thing the right way. There's a lot of pressure in that moment. If you don't get it right, you're grounded for the day. That's a bad day. So you got to get it right. If you can deal with the pressure in that kind of an environment, you're going to get it right when you're up there. And we learn to embrace failure. There's no way you're going to fly this kind of an airplane and get it right the first time, or the second time, or the 15th time, or the 100th time. You're always working at it. And that's the approach that we use today. And I thank you, and I applaud the team that came forward today. Every one of you is getting a copy of Debrief to Win. I've got 4 behind the podium that you're going to walk away with, and I'll autograph those for you as well. Thank you for helping promote our learning in this experience. And what enables our ability to learn is psychological safety. What is psychological safety? It is formally defined as an environment of rewarded vulnerability, admitting to mistakes and weaknesses in a public setting. Let me ask you, who here grew up in an environment of rewarded vulnerability? 2 of us in this room did, and 1 of us didn't know that we did. Here's another definition of what psychological safety is. This one's got a little bit more substance to it. Dr. Timothy Clark, who gives us both, says, it's an environment where we feel included. It's an environment where we feel it's safe for us to learn. It's an environment where it's safe for us to contribute and challenge without fear of any negative implications or ramifications. That's a lot. Let's see what this looks like in graphical form. He says it's a condition where we have increasing opportunity to be vulnerable. He also says that we get psychological safety as a condition of permission and respect. Now, I want to make this real for you, and I want to help you to understand what it means when we've got this. Let's talk about inclusion safety. Let's go back to how it is that I started today's workshop. Let's remember what was told to me when I knocked on the front door of the 58th Fighter Squadron at Eglin Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I was told, uh-oh, we've got a new guy. Hey, new guy, you're now FNG 3, frickin' new guy 3. I was actually given a shared identity that day, different from the one that I grew up with. And when my team told me that my only mission in life was to shut up and learn, I was made safe to engage in the discovery process, to experiment, to make mistakes. 6 months downrange, when my teammates said, you're the right fit for us, they formally named me Cujo, so I was fully included. And that Monday when I came to work, they said, what do you think? I was able to contribute. And in short order, when I became a flight lead and an instructor pilot, I was expected to challenge the status quo. I've had multiple fighter pilots sit in on this workshop who told me I had no idea we had any of this. It just was. And what I'd tell you is the United States Armed Forces spends more money on leadership development than any organization on the planet. They just don't always tell us what it is we're learning. Now, sometimes a business leader will push back and say, maybe that works in the military, but you see, we're a civilian operation. I don't know that it's going to work here. So then we study Google. Anybody ever heard of them? Civilian organization that did an internal study to figure out how come some of our teams are better than others. They called it Project Aristotle. Look it up. There's thousands of articles written about it. Here's the summary. The best teams at Google all have psychological safety. They also have structure and clarity, where team members have clear roles, plans, and goals. What does that sound like? Jimmy's birthday party? You add to it the importance of purpose. What's the meaning and impact of the work that we do? And all of a sudden, we're right there. Today, we've covered 4 of the 5 components of what it is that makes an outstanding Google team that's helped that company go from startup to massive behemoth in very, very short time. Now, what I'd like to do is to show you what it looks like when we've got it. Bear with me as we click on a link here and see how the internet works for us. What I'd ask you to do as we watch this link is to observe the behaviors that you're about to see from the team and to ask yourself what stands out to you. I'm going to look at this a little bit differently. Let's unpack this here. Here you go from the United States Navy Blue Angels.
After every flight, the team also goes through a critical debriefing process, which they consider as important as the actual flight itself. They hash out what worked, what didn't, and no punches are pulled.
We are wide open as we can possibly be to criticisms, and we want to become our own worst critics.
We debrief everything. I'll tell you how specific it gets. We even debrief the march to our airplanes and the march back. So, and you get picked on for every little thing. And most of us haven't marched in 10 years of being in the Navy. So they get very, very specific.
The debriefing process takes probably twice as long as the flight took itself. Rank doesn't come into play, experience levels. Those are good, but you have to set those aside when the criticism starts to come, because that's the only way you're going to learn the maneuver, and that's the only way you're going to get to where the maneuver looks good and it's safe. I think I was a little bit late dropping you guys off, so we're a little low going over the crowd. But other than that, smooth air was nice. It was a little bumpy in the spots, but glad we went flying. Glad to be here. Thanks.
Sure, boss, I'm glad we went flying too. Turned out nice. And I had a couple safeties on the left echelon flat pass coming over. I didn't acknowledge the go diamond call. Just concentrating on where I was going and how quick my movement was going to be. Then I was 20 feet low on the low break cross, 280 feet, and I can fix all those things. So glad to be here.
Okay. Interesting. It's about behaviors. What behaviors stood out to you? We just watched the Blue Angels team debrief one of their missions. What stood out to you in that clip that you thought was significant? Nobody was defensive. They stepped forward, they talked about their own issues, they did so in a very matter-of-fact, somewhat positive way. That's kind of interesting. What else? Yes? Everybody had a valued voice. Everybody was an equal in the debrief. In fact, the first person to admit to mistakes and weaknesses in that setting was the senior ranking officer, the person who evaluated everybody else. How important is it that we lead as leaders, demonstrating the values and behaviors that we expect our teammates to evidence as well? What else stood out to you? They knew that they were the ones who were going to make themselves better, and nobody had to point out any flaws. They came self-equipped to criticize themselves, and they said, I can fix all these things. Did anybody catch the subtlety of how it is that the flight lead ended his comments and how the second guy, Pudge, opened and closed his comments? Happy to be here. There's a Blue Angel who gives an entire workshop presentation called Happy to be here. You want to know what the Blue Angels do that the Thunderbirds do as well? They're so wedded to their purpose that they bring gratitude into their debriefs where they learn how to do their jobs better. What an amazing world it would be if we brought gratitude into our accountability sessions that said we're grateful for the opportunity to improve. Maybe that's a takeaway from the Blue Angels. In all cases, the way to success is by focusing on behaviors that tie to the debrief core values, and there are 6, and it starts with vulnerability. And you're looking at a former fighter squadron commander, former instructor at your fighter weapons school who's telling you that I became who I was because I learned early on from the previous generation that we can only be our best if we're vulnerable enough to admit to our own mistakes and weaknesses, not just sometimes, not just when it's convenient, but all the time, after every single mission. Oh, by the way, the debrief is a collaboration. We respect and give our teammates the permission to collaborate on unpacking what it is that we need to learn, which says that we see our teammates as valued members of how it is that we're going to achieve mission success, and everything is tied to respect. Then you get into the next 4. Let's start with empathy. Remember the definition of what a debrief is, the constructive evaluation of decision quality. In order to understand decision quality, we have to walk in the shoes of somebody who's made the decision. And this is another reason why I don't like root cause analysis, is because it's absent typically empathy. And so we talked earlier about the importance of asking why. Remember, we went through the illustration, why did you show up late? Well, why didn't you fill gas? And da-da-da-da. Here's the issue with why. I come to you and I ask, why are you wearing the shirt, the dress, the pants that you're wearing today? How does that feel? It puts you on the defensive. It puts all of us on the why question puts us on the defensive. And even if we can justify why it is we're kind of wondering, why did Cujo ask me this question? You know how we ask the why question in a fighter squadron? We ask it this way: hey, help me understand what's going on in your cockpit at this time. Walk me through what you're seeing from your perspective at this time. Hey, what's the sense that you have when she says that thing at this time? And that basically says, I respect you, I understand that there was something that informed your decision. And when they share, because they're more inclined to share when you ask the why question that way, we say, thanks. Thank you I appreciate that. Thanks for that insight. Empathy, that's how we're gonna understand quality of decisions. The next piece, we go further down this thing, self-awareness. Sometimes we think self-awareness means being able to be self-critical, and there's a component of that. The Blue Angels came equipped to the debrief. They had done their tape review. They knew what mistakes that they had made, but self-awareness in the debrief context is more. It's about emotional intelligence. And really it comes down to, and especially on the heels of a failure, being able to self-manage so that you can manage the relationships of the team. If you've just experienced a failure and you come in here negative, everybody's gonna go negative. If you can learn to self-manage and be positive as you talk about a failure, now there's hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today. Hey, Cujo, we were 2 decisions away from victory today. High EQ from the instructor pilot who taught me this. Then we get into this nasty little thing here, humility, freedom from pride or arrogance. Hey, does anybody here ever watch a movie about second-rate pilots that came out in 1986 starring Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis? Top Gun, I think it was called. Did you see any humility at any point in that movie? No. One of 2 things they got wrong. The other one was the volleyball scene. Humility, this is a necessary precondition if we're going to get any value from failure. I've got to leave ego behind. I've got to get rid of pride. Friends, you're looking at a very prideful person. I've had to work on humility every day of my life in order to be able to live the debrief core values. And I know that this is hard. In the assessment survey, this is the question that's answered by every organization to date with the lowest score. On my team, we value and manifest humility in all we do. And then the final piece of all of this thing goes back to our original definition of accountability, taking absolute ownership. Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL, you may have seen him on Fox News the other day, talking about what he would have done in Afghanistan. Leaders must own everything in their world. There is no one else to blame. Ownership's on us. And if we can learn to take ownership, we make it possible for our teammates to do the exact same thing. For all of this, we've got to translate these nice-sounding words into behaviors. It's about how we act, not what we scrawl on the wall or what we talk about once a year in that briefing in January or December. It's about how we come to work every day, which is why I want to end how we began. I want to take you back to the fighter squadron. I want to unpack a ritual that we've adopted in the American Air Force. For sure, we've taken this thing to a new level post-Vietnam, prior to Desert Storm. It's the Friday roll call, something that I miss, one of the happiest moments in a fighter squadron. So let's talk about this notion of what a roll call is. What is a roll call? It's an opportunity for the tribe to get together. When do we do it? Every Friday afternoon. Where does it take place? Squadron bar. Air Force calls them heritage rooms now. They're the squadron bar. Who is invited? Any member of the tribe. Might be a 4-star general serving in the Pentagon, visiting Eglin Air Force Base, you're invited. Might be a retiree, like somebody sitting right over here, you're invited. But it's only members of the tribe, because what happens at roll call has to stay within the security and the safety of the tribe. You don't show up late, you're there every Friday. Oh, I miss it. What happens? Fighter aviation, it's a dangerous place to do business. It's a really disruptive office space up there. Most of us have near-death stories. All of us look back fondly on the fact that our takeoffs hopefully equaled our landings. We don't take that for granted. We know that we're lucky to still be here. Every Friday, we celebrate that fact. Every Friday at roll call, we get together as a tribe, and it's a celebration of life. And we tell stories about each other. And the threshold for truth of any story that's told at roll call is 10%. So you might imagine how the little mistake that you made on Tuesday comes across on Friday by an expert storyteller. I miss those tremendously as well. Now, it's an overarchingly positive ethic and attitude atmosphere in the roll call, but it's not just about the funny stuff. As we're talking about psychological safety, I want to share with you that there's also the other side of the equation that we unpack at roll call. And so let's talk about this scenario. Let's say that Ron and I, your team lead from today's Jimmy birthday party experience, he and I are F-15 pilots. We're privileged to fly F-15s at the 33rd Fighter Wing, Eglin Air Force Base, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And let's say that Monday, the two of us flew on a mission where the two of us fought against 8 F-16s from Texas. It's a 2v8. In the F-15 world, we think that's a fair fight, and we're right. Let's say everything was going great on our mission, Ron, right up until the point where I shot you. That, friends, is called fratricide, and that happens. It's a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous battle space in which we operate, and figuring out which dot's good and which dot's bad, that's hard to do. Which is why we do not carry live air-to-air ordnance on a training mission. Ron's still here. But guess what? The systems are so sophisticated that we know instantaneously that it's happened. And when it does, the feeling in the pit of your stomach is so horrific that it lasts for days. I know because I've done it twice. Okay? Here's the guarantee. When we come back and land, Ron and I are going to go debrief our decisions, and specifically mine. We're going to constructively evaluate the decision that led to me shooting my teammate. We're going to figure out what we can learn from this to change behavior so that tomorrow's mission goes better. That's 100% guaranteed. But guess what? Because our adversaries came to us from Texas, they flew back to Texas. They gave us their critical mission data, but they're not there, and neither are you. You're busy preparing for your own missions, or maybe you're flying them right now. It's only the two of us in that debrief room, so potentially, I go to Ron and I say, hey, once the debrief is done, hey man, we're just keeping this between you and me, right, brother? And Ron's like, yeah, Cujo, I got your back. And you never hear anything about this. Believe me when I say that never happens. Not only does that never happen, Ron knows the story that I'm going to tell on Friday. And it's always going to be this. At roll call on Friday night, I'm going to tell the story of how I shot Ron, my teammate, our squadron mate. And I'm not going to try to make it any better than it sounded. I'm not going to say you would have done the same thing in my shoes, or Ron was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm going to stick with the facts that we learned in the debrief. I'm going to tell you what it is that I'm going to do differently about this next time. And part of our ethos says I'm going to make a contribution to the squadron bar, a bottle of something really expensive. It's Ron after all, and I let all of you down. It's going to hurt the pocketbook. And when I bring that bottle of whatever it is up to the bar top and I put it there and I go back to my spot in the room, you know what you're going to do every single time? A toast to Cujo. Not for the mistake that was made, but because I took ownership of it and I shared it with you. Now here's the beautiful part of this ritual. When the formalities are done and the door is thrown open and friends and guests and visitors are invited in, you're going to come to me. Each of you who has a relevant story, you're going to put your arm around me and say, Cujo, I've been there, brother. I've done the same. I've done it 3 times. Here's what I've learned every time. Vicky's going to come up and say, I've done this 4 times. Here's what's been consistent about all 4 of those. Thanks for reminding me so that on Monday when I come back to work, I'm not going to make the same mistake. Appreciate you, Cujo. You're doing great work. And I'm going to hear it from a bunch of you that I'm not alone. I'm going to hear it from a bunch of you that you've been in the same exact shoes and you've learned from it, which means I can too. You're going to help me to be resilient. You're going to help me to bounce back from this thing and believe in myself again. That's the value of this particular ritual, and it reinforces psychological safety. And then you go study a fighter squadron. It's one of the manifestations of the highest degree of psychological safety you're going to see in any organization. We just don't know that we've got it. Have to reverse engineer that. Then you go back to Edmondson. What she said is, when she started her doctoral thesis on teams and mistakes, she expected that the best teams would make the least mistakes, and she was shocked to find that the best teams had more mistakes than the worst. It almost derailed her work. It almost caused her to shut down her shop. She was so frustrated by this that she dug deeper, and what she found was, in actuality, the best teams don't make more mistakes. They just talk about all of them, and they don't repeat them. And the worst teams cover it up, and they're not learning. And they're staying static, or they're falling backwards. They're not building trust. Their teams aren't strong. You want a good resource to reference, to learn how to do what we're talking about? Either of these books, and in fact, both of them are outstanding. You'll finish reading both of these in 4 hours or less. You'll reread both of them 6 or 7 times. And it'll demonstrate to you how any of us can do what it is that an American Air Force fighter squadron does consistently to be able to win and defend and do what we need, because we're always working against fear. Does it sound possible? Absolutely. And the best part about the Fearless organization is Edmonton's done the research to show multiple business examples of how effective this is in allowing us to build a culture of accountability, which is exactly why we're here. And so we end where we started. Recognize that what we're talking about is mission critical to keeping our economy strong. Both of the companies that I joined on the heels of colorectal cancer failed as a result of not having what it is that we're talking about today. That's an unacceptable outcome for our economy and for our nation. Which brings me to VMAX Group's purpose. I believe in the power of purpose. And here's ours. It's to teach and inspire real teamwork, everything that you heard today, so that you can survive in disruption, so that we can field the defense that we need by virtue of a strong economy. You empower and equip our nation's armed forces to defend us. I hope you realize that. And that's a huge responsibility. And so I ask you on behalf of our brothers and sisters out there guarding us forward, keep on doing outstanding work. We need you to win. My name is Robert Cujo Teschner. I was your 125th F-15 instructor at your weapons school, Nellis Air Force Base, beautiful, Las Vegas, Nevada. Our credo at the weapons school has always been and will always be humble, approachable, credible. We've got to be humble if we're going to embrace and learn from failure. We've got to be approachable because a fighter pilot is a teacher first and always, and what we teach better be right because lives are on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for helping me to realize my purpose by inviting me to be here in your midst today and for making today fun. I would specifically highlight the Jimmy's Birthday Party team for making today fun and for helping us to advance the cause of learning. I would ask you four to come up to me afterwards so that you can get your books. Ladies and gentlemen, God bless the United States of America, and God bless each and every one of you as you continue to help us to be strong. Appreciate you all. It's back over to you, Bruce. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, each and every one of you. Thank you.
Our November 5th speaker, just pass the name tags to the outside, they'll collect them. Our November 5th speaker is Dave Nelson. What he does is amazing. He's got a great engineering background and a social media background and has been a public speaker and a consultant for a number of years. But what he has done is taken a long lost interview of Steve Jobs done by the BBC when Steve Jobs was in between his success and failure, or failure and success, the early Apple days and the later ones, when maybe Steve wasn't quite humble yet, and talks about some leadership principles. Dave shows certain segments from that interview and then covers a leadership point learned from that particular part of the video. It's a powerful presentation. I've heard Dave speak 3 different times. If you're a guest of Connell Insurance, please see the person that invited you to get a ticket to come to that event. If you're a co-sponsor of our event, talk to your co-sponsor coordinator to get tickets for that event. If you're a paying customer for this event today, see me over at the table as you exit, and we can either get you signed up for the next one, or we could talk later about you coming to that. Those are our speakers for the whole series. After Dave in November, in February, we have a futurist. He'll be talking about the current trends in society, and obviously he has to change his speech every week, and talking about the economy. And then our speaker in May is just a powerful presentation on health and fitness and meditation and nutrition and everything a person needs to do to take care of themselves so they can be a successful and a healthy person in business and in their personal life. So that's what we got coming up during these next 3 meetings. I'd like to turn it back to Jeff. I think he's going to be the door prize drawer. Let's hear it for Jeff.
Thank you. Cujo, debrief to win. We're going to have a debrief session right after this. I can't wait. Yeah, stage lighting. Now, I don't want to give it away yet. Okay, stage lighting for next time. All right, here we go real quick. Hey, HR professionals, I know several of you are getting the HR credits for this, so I have a number for you. Haley, I have a number for you. So if it's Sherm, sorry everybody who doesn't get HR credit for this, but you should submit it to Sherm anyway. 21-4444 KT. Got that one? 21-4444 KT, that's Sherm. HRCI, this is the code you enter to get your credits, 566139. 566139. If you didn't get that, just come find me after this. Okay, we're gonna do these real quick and get you on your way. Name tags, we have drawings. We have 8. Okay, what's the first one we're drawing for? Oh, they get to pick? That's not good. That's not good. This is a mess. We're definitely debriefing this right after this.
We have Mikado.
Ridiculous.
We have Bass Pro.
All right, here we go.
Coldstone.
Give me the Bass Pro one for us. Here we go. Cujo. No, that's jokes, not Cujo. Sarah Wolverin, Development Center of the Ozarks. Are you here? There you are. All right, thank you. We'll take that. We have big whiskeys. Oh, that's cool. Okay. Ron Bogart. No, not Ron. Okay, here we go. Hey, Michelle Eaton. Michael Eaton. I said Michelle. How embarrassing. It says Michael. It says it right here. We'll bring it to you, Michael. Tell Michelle hello. All right, I'll just put that there. All right, Nakado. That's the one where the flames are in front of you. That's a good place to bring the family. Community Blood Center of the Ozarks. Vanessa. All right, where are you? You're in the back. All right. We'll come to you. That one, okay. I'm gonna dig deep this time. Here we go. Larry Stock, Queen City Roofing and Sheet Metal. Hertz Donut, that seems appropriate. Donuts on the job site? Shame on me, Michelle. I mean, Michael. I'm not gonna forget that. I'm not gonna forget that. Larry, are you still here? Oh, Larry, we'll come to you. We'll come to you. All right, here we go. Next one is, what's the price for this one?
Cold Stone Creamery.
That goes to Larry. Cold Stone Creamy. Okay, Stephanie O'Connor, City Utilities. Awesome. That's okay. Debrief. We're definitely debriefing. More people to pass out the prizes. Man, debriefing is really something. Bass Pro, well, how much is that? Oh, okay. All right. If it was going to be more than that, I think we'd keep it. But Kim Morris, Toffin Associates. Okay. Okay. Kim. There's Kim. Yeah. Now we're just all getting. Here we go. Oh, what do we have? Do we have another one? Nakado with the flame. Vicki Owens, Volt. You're right there. I'll do this one. Look at me, Cujo. I'm leading. Is that our last one? Oh, we have one more. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, another Bass Pro. I'm really going to dig for this one. All right. All right, Mike Cox. Mike, are you here? I'm coming to you, I guess. To Michael Cox. Doco Inc.? Yeah, that's the Mike Cox. Yeah, okay, we're good. Okay, congratulations, everybody. We got your HR certificate numbers. Oh, this is another free thing. Okay, this is our last one. So the Leader Paradox. This is a ticket to attend the Branson Tri-Lakes HR Association Leader Paradox presented by, oh, that's us, Connell Insurance, September 8th. There we go. All right, thanks for being here. You're over there on the table. Thank you. Okay, Joan Gibson, Director of HR, Girl Scouts of the Missouri Heartland. There you are. There you go. Here, you take this too. Okay, anything else, Bruce? Hey, thank you on behalf of Connell Insurance. Enjoy your day and make sure you get that HR code. HR code, yeah, QR code.